Hi everyone, I'm John Pett, author, speaker, and performer.
And I'm Jeff Sabilico, entertainer, comedian, and almost as much fun as John.
And together, we're on a mission to take you on a journey that explores and reveals the critical elements for you to survive and thrive within the digital transformation.
We will be here to guide you, to engage you, and get you involved.
To take your questions and get the answers from the experts and execs.
So grab a beverage, get comfortable, and get excited.
Because this is MEF Infinite Edge. Today, we've got service and technology experts ready to explore the challenges and opportunities for delivering networking solutions optimized for a work-from-anywhere world. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome back, friends, to the MEF Infinite Edge series, episode number 2, as we explore the challenges and opportunities for delivering networking solutions that are optimized for a work-from-anywhere world. I'm John Pett, your host and your intrepid tour guide. And in this episode, we're going to drill down and focus on empowering enterprises with innovative solutions like SD-WAN, SASE, 5G, and an emerging topic, network slicing. If you missed episode 1, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's on demand and in our event platform. Our key theme you'll hear throughout today is the importance of MEF certifications for service providers, professionals, and technology vendors. So be sure to check out these important programs at MEF.net. Join the discussion as we discover new ways to maximize employee productivity, increase business agility, and gain a competitive edge in this period of dramatic change. Keeping our eye on what is important for productivity is especially critical when we can be misdirected at a moment's notice. And yes, I do believe an example may just be in order. As a magician, misdirection is a key to what I do, but let's keep it simple and quick and see if you can follow this one along. Ready? Let's check. Folks, welcome back to the Pets Magic Bar. That's right, we're going to play a little game, and I don't want you to be misdirected. However, it is my job, but please do try to play along. We're going to be using a few props for this so you can see up close and personal. Yes, indeed, there is money on the line for this occasion, along with some cards. This is a game called the 3-Card Monty, and it's played like this. Your job is to follow the ace. You put the money where you think the ace is. So your 3, the ace, and the 2, you obviously could bet the middle and you go home a winner. But what happens when we begin to add chaos and add confusion, move them around a little bit? You could bet the 1 or the 2 or the 3. Hopefully paying perfect attention, and you know for a fact the ace is still on the far side of the table, but there was no money on it. Let's make it a little bit more interesting, shall we? We'll give you the easy bet right there for that first $100. Of course, where's your ace? Well, don't fall for that. You see, the ace is still in the hand. Yeah, don't worry. We will absolutely do that again. Let's move the 2 all the way to the bottom. So the 2 you should see underneath the entire time. The 3 then stays on top. Bet on your ace. If you're playing like a fool, you know that is not the ace. That's 2, meaning 200. Yeah, dollars. Okay, I'll make this easier. I feel a little bad. Let's get rid of 1 card, shall we? Let's get rid of that. Now you only have 2 to bet on, the ace and the 2. Which hand do you think, the left or the right? For the 300. Not 300 for you, that's 300 for me. You see, ooh, that's, I'm feeling bad, but I haven't been fair. I won't lie, I have not been fair. I've only shown you the back of the cards. What if I show you the front and you openly now bet on the ace that you can see the entire time? So you know that the 3's out of the game, you know that the 2's out of the game, and you can bet on that final ace for the $400. And you could go with, what do you think? Yeah, absolutely, the ace down there. There's your ace, there's your 2, and that's the 3-Card Monty. And that's when I take all of it and ask, are there any questions? Or I just run out the door. But don't be misdirected. Today is about connecting and focusing and learning. Keep that in mind as I spend your dollars, all right? Let's get back to the main show. Well, today I won't be joined live by my Aussie sleight of hand sketch buddy, Matt McGain, but keep an eye out for him and his masterful artistry popping up during the show today. I'm looking forward to it, Matt. Before we move to our sessions, let me remind you about all the networking opportunities available right now at your fingertips. This platform provides a number of ways to connect, and that's what we want you to do today. Connect with other attendees and our amazing sponsors. Click the navigation bar on the left to visit our sponsors, join one of their topical roundtable discussions, or chat with them live. Now, the roundtables, they can be accessed by clicking Meet My Peers. Hey, you can even start your own roundtable or simply check out the list of options from other attendees. Maybe you just want to connect one-on-one with other attendees. You can do that too. Click on the networking button to see who's here, and from there, you can even record a short video shout out to the audience by using the soapbox feature. It's cool. Just click the record button, look into the camera, and start talking to the friends, all right? It's easy. Although our segments today were pre-recorded, many of our speakers will also be live and online with us during their segment, scanning the chat, answering questions, and interacting with you directly. So pay attention to what the chat window says. Get involved and be a part of it. Lastly, don't forget to stick around after the episode for even more networking time, including additional opportunities for one-to-one live chats and roundtable events from our sponsors, accredited training providers, and MEF. What are you waiting for? This is it. Click one of the networking options. This is your time. Go to your left and start connecting while we get this show on the road. Recently, editor and publisher Jim Carroll from Converge Network Digest sat down with Will Eberall, Assistant VP of Edge Solutions Product Marketing Management for AT&T Business, to discuss his perspective on how enterprises are taking advantage of SD-WAN as they confront a very new normal. But first, how about a message from AT&T?
Data, when it moves, it has the potential to transform nearly every part of your business. But when data is siloed, slow, and people and technologies are not connected, that potential is lost. What if you could connect virtually every corner of your business, unify and accelerate the flow of data, and put it to use? AT&T helps you operate with edge-to-edge intelligence from the core of your network to the far reaches of your business. A highly secure orchestration of all the pieces you need to make data work for you. Today, our customers are using edge-to-edge intelligence to understand and serve their customers better, predictively, to move with greater speed and agility, and to scale from nearly anywhere. As your business starts to fully utilize the power of edge-to-edge, automation will help you make the right connections at the right time with the security you need. From factories, using data to signal engineers to troubleshoot a problem before it is a problem, to retailers using a connected supply chain to boldly change their industry. By empowering our customers to connect their data to anything, to connect their data to everything, we can help you turn potential to results. That's the remarkable effect of edge-to-edge intelligence. AT&T can help you get there.
Hi, Will. How are you doing?
Great, Jim. Glad to be here.
So, this is a really crazy time in the networking business, in the world in general. Dealing with the pandemic comes first to mind. So, in your view, what has been your experience? What is the overarching big theme that keeps you guys going at AT&T Business these days?
Oh, it's definitely accelerated a lot of different aspects of our business. Like on our enterprise side, we've seen within our clients, just from a transformation perspective, it's accelerated a lot of our more digital aspects of our own product portfolio. How we're integrating a lot of those, in the past, we've been able to provide some of those from a single product perspective, but our clients are looking for more end-to-end integration across our portfolio too. So that's been a dynamic aspect to a lot of the change we're seeing. it was interesting. Right out of the gate, it was all about damage control and how they're adapting to this new environment and having to scale, where maybe they had a population of 1,000 remote workers and now having to scale to 10,000. So the challenges were definitely different. I think they gravitated towards a lot of the same technologies they're already using and how do they scale those. But I think it did expose, some of the scale issues. So if it's equipment based, can they get enough equipment to support that? The head-end environment that they're coming into. I think the connectivity issue, as you go from enterprise to consumer, that blend and having the right quality of connectivity in that home environment to support now a full enterprise stack of applications. So we definitely saw a bleed of, new broadband, wireless technologies infused in there, and a variety of equipment and software-based technologies to help kind of that scale that work from home user, depending on their requirements.
Okay. So I'm especially interested in what you guys have been doing on SD-WAN, or maybe we should back up and say IPVPNs in general, and then maybe this transition to SD-WANs. How has that been playing out these last couple of months?
Yeah, I think, with the pandemic, I would say that really from a corporate perspective, like I said, I think their primary focus was employee productivity. So it was really shifting from in-house to work from home and keeping that productivity going. But as the dust settled, I think, the bigger initiatives around digital transformation, cloud, mobile first, and SD-WAN really picked up steam. So we've definitely seen an uptick in clients evaluating SD-WAN. We've seen elements of it start to be evaluated kind of in that work from home capacity. I think there's some work to do more from an evolution perspective of where that technology is at to make it kind of fit that environment better. But yeah, on the enterprise side, there's been a huge uptick in really helping enable their kind of cloud strategy and be more agile. In general, now I see it much more broadly adopted. I see across all enterprises, COVID has accelerated that. They're all evaluating it now. And beyond just the technology itself, I think where we're seeing it, obviously our core business is built on the underlay, the network capabilities of MPLS and internet and wireless and broadband, really mixing and matching those underlay technologies with the overlay power of SD-WAN. That's truly, one of the value propositions of it is being able to provide more efficient use of that underlay technology because of its dynamic understanding of the application profile and how the underlay can route and support that application and doing that in real time. So clients are seeing, a big uptick in the value of their network capabilities because now they've got intelligent routing on top of that. So it's a really powerful combination when you look at the underlay overlay stack that clients are, using.
Yeah, so one thing, network administrators have always been really wary of is like, don't give me something that's non-standard, right? Give me something that is proven, that other people are using, that is scalable, all of those kind of attributes. Has there been that kind of concern about SD-WAN, or are companies kind of accepted it as, all right, this is an established technology now?
It's definitely gone, when you think about any new technology, it goes through a different cycle, right? The hype cycle through maturity. And SD-WAN is at that full maturity route, man, from an adoption perspective. So I still think, when you look at SD-WAN, early on it was plug and play, drastic cost savings on the network were a lot of the simple drivers. But like I said, I think clients are realizing there's broader value associated with it that are really, clients are driving to those business outcomes when they're looking at SD-WAN. But the overarching elements of, is it going to work? There is complexity there. And I don't think you can gloss over, MEF creating the first global standard around SD-WAN, us just recently certifying against that standard. It is really important because, you can't gloss over that this is newer software technology and there's new software releases all the time. And how is that going to interact with different underlay technologies or with different security technologies in the cloud? So, building, testing, certifying against these different combinations really gives our clients peace of mind knowing that it's going to function, it's going to perform to the expectations that they're purchasing it for.
Yeah, I'd like to dig down a little bit deeper into that certification. So it was the MEF 3.0 WAN certification that you guys recently did?
Exactly. Yep. We worked with Spirit from the certification partner perspective. We do a lot of different certifications with Spirit, and then from a technology perspective, we worked with VMware's SD-WAN technology. They're one of the first technologies we onboarded from our managed SD-WAN portfolio perspective. But they're the first one that we certified. We're going to look to do additional certifications with the others in our portfolio as well.
Okay, and so from your customer's perspective, when they see that, what does that really tell them? What does that mean to them?
It means that we're building to a standard out there. It means that when we deploy it, it's going to operate with different network technologies. So it's not just us doing our own testing saying it's going to work. It's really that interoperability. Like I said, when you're looking to mix it with different network services, mix it with different security services, all of that is really important. So it is giving the client peace of mind knowing that it's not just AT&T testing it. They're certifying it against a global standard.
Okay. All right. Great. So now that they know that it's certified, what are the key attributes or features? I mean, what is it that tells them okay, this is a value for my business?
Yeah, the value elements. Each client has different reasons for adopting technology for SD-WAN specifically. So from I can drive more value out of the underlay technology instead of having a single MPLS architecture. And now I'm in a hybrid. I've got different site types, so I'm driving better use of that underlay technology because the dynamic performance routing capabilities of SD-WAN. So there's that. It's got real-time failover. So if historically in traditional networking, if there's a hard down, it fails to a secondary circuit. With SD-WAN, it detects just minor performance issues. If I've got packet loss of 3% that would jeopardize this video call we're on right now, it could dynamically flip that to a secondary wireless connection that's performing better and not interrupt the actual flow of this session. So, reliability, application performance, when you move back to kind of that home user, we're on a broadband connection right now. If there's issues with that broadband connection, can it do dynamic remediation and provide performance enhancements? That's the beauty of this technology. And so I think there's a lot of different factors. I wouldn't say, every client has different drivers of what is most important to them, but there are commonalities, like I said, the reliability, the application performance, the cost elements associated when you look at it holistically. Those are some of the typical ones.
Okay. And, I guess also that if those features and values are different among different companies, they probably have different starting points as well, right? I mean, it might be an enterprise that's on a old style IP VPN or somebody who's on a bulletproof MPLS network.
Right.
So I guess different migration strategies also are in play here.
There really are. Most of them are going to have some trigger event that gets them to look at the technology. Is it, end of life routers, right? Is it, their current WAN architecture, back to some of the bigger trends of, cloud adoption. My endpoints are no longer in my physical branch. They're all over the place. So how do I have a network that can be more agile and scale? So, you have to think about, what is that trigger event that's going to get me to look at that technology, define those business outcomes. What's really important for me to adopt, and I'm going to measure success against those business outcomes. And then, the migration element in general, you can't gloss over the complexity associated with going from a current state to this future SD-WAN state. And, my advice in clients navigating that is spend some time really defining what my current requirements are and work with a partner, a managed partner like AT&T to really vet those against a variety of different SD-WAN technologies. Not all SD-WAN is created equal. They all have different, capabilities and functionality. So you mirror that once I understand my requirements, what's the best technology, and then have a partner, because these are fairly complex migrations. What are the pitfalls? Having a partner navigate that with them is really important in the sense where you've got expert around the technology from, validating that design, to overseeing the test and turnups of that migration to that kind of lifecycle day two support is also pivotal as well.
I keep hearing out here in Silicon Valley of different companies that say that they may not be going back into the office till September.
Yeah, when you look at the pandemic, like I said, I think a lot of businesses really kind of gravitated to, what's the technology that I have in place that I can quickly scale and do that damage control. But, as the dust has settled and they're thinking about this broader, 30% of my population is not going to come back into my office. They're going to continue to work from home for 5, maybe 10 years. What is that best architecture? And SD-WAN, was kind of built more for kind of the enterprise branch headquarter, different site types. But I think that's the opportunity for SD-WAN is really to scale more smaller form factor devices, lower cost points to help with kind of those power users in that work from home, lower cost points, simpler functionality that now you've got, whether I'm in my branch, whether I'm at, my home, I can still see that user. I can still manage policy, configuration, support across that end to end. And it doesn't always have to be equipped. I think there's going to be capabilities to do zero trust network access, which is kind of the evolution of SASE integration with SD-WAN, which will give kind of different tiers of user populations that you're supporting, whether I'm at home, maybe that is equipment based, but as I travel, I'm using my mobile device and how I connect into the network is the same, whether I'm in the office, whether I'm at my home or elsewhere. So that security, that functionality from a performance perspective is across the single environment.
Yeah. So Will, you just raised like the last issue I wanted to talk to you about today, which is security and, where we go next with this. I heard you say also damage control, and, for any network manager, those words are, wow, you got to pay attention to that. So on the security front and on the SASE front in particular, how do you see this playing out in the next year or two?
I think there's a huge opportunity. Back to kind of where SD-WAN is on the maturity scale. It's in the maturity scale. It's at full adoption right now. The technology is there. There's a lot of capabilities. Enterprises are rolling this out in mass scale. SASE is fairly in the early developments from where the full potential where it's going to go. Right. So, but that is the perfect evolution. You think about how enterprises are solving this integration of SD-WAN and security right now. It's multi-vendor. I've got different, zero trust networking or remote access capabilities for my remote workers. I've got a different SD-WAN technology in my enterprises. I've got different cloud security technologies. I've got different CASB security elements. And the integration adds complexity. The visibility into and lifecycle support of these different technologies adds complexity. That's the world we're operating in now. That's what that environment looks like. But with SASE, the potential is that kind of single vendor technology stack end to end across that. And policy management, security, it takes a lot of risk out, simplifies that architecture, and allows them to really scale to new levels that they're not able to right now. So I think the potential is significant. You add in the elements of AI where, now it's not just a network administrator, seeing trouble issues and having to diagnose and make configuration changes to remediate issues. You've got the intelligence, the analytics to say, hey, we're seeing these common errors. The AI can identify what that error is, alert the IT manager to maybe to make that remediation, or even make that remediation on the company's behalf. So the combination of AI, SASE, massive potential. It's very exciting that we're going to see a lot of enhancements over the next couple of years.
Okay. So just before I let you go, there was two, I guess, one forward-looking concept that I didn't hear you mention. So I wanted to bring that back into the conversation, and that's virtual edge. And, as this access question gets played out, there is this huge interest of what happens at that virtual edge. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the virtual edge is really powerful because, back to I've got appliances that are doing that functionality now versus it being a software virtual function that I'm provisioning, and being able to service chain multiple virtual functions. So that concept's been around for a while. And I think the orchestration is getting to a point where now I can, do that in more meaningful ways. I can provision, Azure compute down to my premise to process certain really latency sensitive applications with 5G, inside that building to provide autonomous guided vehicles or different IoT applications. And I can virtualize the different network functions, the security functions, the SD-WAN functions in that environment. Or I can virtualize SD-WAN into some of these cloud elements that I'm versus deploying physical appliances. So, the virtual edge concept has been around for a little while now, but the adoption, I think, still has a ways to go. And some of these use cases, I think, with the integration of 5G and what we're doing with edge compute now, there's a lot of additional great business use cases that we're going to see that kind of heat up with.
Awesome. Hey, well, this has been a great conversation. Well, I've really appreciated it. Thanks for sharing your thoughts today.
Thanks, Jim. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Now that was a great first segment, and congrats to AT&T for their new MEF 3.0 SD-WAN certification. Feel free to shout out Jim and Will and all of our speakers today in the chat window. They're right there. I know they'd love to hear from you personally. Okay, with the foundation for today's topic firmly laid, let's continue to build with another insightful executive conversation. For that, Jim Carroll is back with Paul Joyce, EVP Orange Global Solutions for Business, and Osa Tamzins, SVP, Head of Business Area Technologies and New Businesses, Ericsson, right after this.
Imagine a world where you can work wherever you want, where remote healthcare is a reality, where cities listen to you, where companies use their data intelligence to serve their customers, their employees, their growth. Imagine and realize that this world is yours, ours. At Orange Business Services, we are committed to building that world with you by putting the reality of your business at the very heart of our approach, because you are unique. Unique like our dual expertise as a telecom operator and an IT integrator. We are a network-native digital services company. We can use our expertise in today's and tomorrow's networks to build and orchestrate your global digital value chain. Virtualized networks, 5G, cloud, cybersecurity, data analytics and artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, digital workspace. We are by your side to help you increase the impact of your projects. With a presence in more than 200 countries and territories and 27,000 employees and B2B experts, we are by your side every day. So together, let's imagine and build tomorrow.
Today we have two executives sharing their thoughts with us, Paul Joyce of Orange and Osa Tamzins from Ericsson. So we hope to get a good perspective both from the operators as well as from the equipment vendors. How is the network actually performing and adapting to these changes? So let's kick it off. Paul, how has your company, as one of the major network operators in Europe, been adapting to this new work from home, work from anywhere environment?
Thanks, Jim. Hi, Osa. This has been a major challenge, of course, unforeseen. We have business critical programs, so to react to all kinds of disasters, geographical, technical, political, but nothing at this scale worldwide, a pandemic simultaneously. So first of all, we had to mobilize our workforce of about 150,000 people in more than 180 countries. of course, concentration centers in different areas. So the first thing was the continuity of service for all of our customers. And that requires both people coming to access remotely all of the services, but also intervention, field intervention. We did not stop telling field technicians to intervene, to maintain, to repair, to install for critical services, both for ourselves, but also for our customers, wherever we were. I think some of the biggest challenges are quite often the actual basic equipment on PCs. Do we have enough PCs? And of course, the working environment for our staff. We have to bear in mind that some of our staff are working in houses where there could be 2 or 3 generations. So equipping them, helping them to work into that environment. And the last point I would say was the dramatic and continuous flow in data flows. We saw new data flows. We saw multiples of 5 to 15. We saw mobile networks being saturated. And we saw as well a lot of increases in usage of all of our infrastructure around the world. So I think it's being prepared for this, having standardized processes, having global capabilities and standardized tools, and a great workforce who really stepped up to the challenge and moved forward.
Great. Also, I'd like to welcome you to the conversation as well. And from your perspective and from Ericsson's perspective as a global organization, how have you adapted to this pandemic?
Hi, Jim, and great to see you again, Paul. I think if you look at Ericsson, we're just like Orange. We're a company present in more than 180 countries, around 100,000 people, and we're in the midst of supporting our customers with the 5G rollouts around the world. And I think there's this shift of all of us having to work from home has emphasized the importance of digital infrastructure and connectivity, as Paul pointed out. But I think it also interestingly has shown how quickly we can adapt and change. And I think it shows also it's not the technology that typically is the limiting factor. It's actually how quickly are we willing to try to something new and accept and use and change our way of working. And here I has found it extremely impressive how 85,000 are our staff overnight, and within 48 hours we're working from home. And if you put that in context, we're having a big part of our team in the services side. Some they're out in the field in supporting Orange and other companies in upgrading capacity. What we call the network here is to continue to roll out 5G and build up that capacity. And we're prioritized for them to be safely in the office and in the field. But we also have a lot of things run remotely. For instance, we run the networks on behalf of several customers around the world, and in total 1 billion subscribers, 1 billion mobile subscribers around the world. We continue to keep that up and running throughout the pandemic. And then I think there are simple things, just like Paul mentioned, availability of laptops. We had one of these, classic internal transformation projects where we're upgrading our IT environment, and typically these projects go on for some time and take time, but we were forced to make that full shift to Teams, which we were in the midst of basically in a number of days and weeks and increased the capacity, but also got everyone to change to the new tool. I think just a great example of how, at the daily working model actually adapt and do things that otherwise would have taken times and incentives for people to try to something new.
Yeah, it seems like a miracle that it does all work and that it has been coming together for the most part. Paul, you mentioned planning. Of course, planning for disasters would be of paramount importance at a network operator. But planning for a pandemic is something different. It's not just your company or your biggest customer that has the emergency. It's all of society that has the emergency.
Absolutely. And, that's the hardest part, I would say, is because we have to manage, first and foremost, the safety of our people and the continuity of their access to the applications. And the second of all is the customers and the infrastructure. We multiplied our transatlantic capacity by 3 to 4-fold. Please bear in mind that on average, 75% of the traffic from any European user goes across the Atlantic to a destination point in North America. So, and we also had the simultaneous launching of Disney Channel, which was happening at the same time as the pandemic. So we had to kind of deal with that as well, because that was going to be more and more used by people at home. Now, customer-wise, I give you many examples, but probably 2 or 3 spring to mind. One is a global PC printer manufacturer who had 10,000 agents in their contact center and were selling a lot of infrastructure for the reasons we just said. So they absolutely needed continuity of service. So moving from 35 contact centers in different countries around the world to working from home in a quite complex business model, that was achieved overnight by the support of our teams with, of course, the customer teams. Clinics, National Health Service in the UK, hospitals in France, you had to set up immediately remote secure access for hospitals, for doctors, for sharing information amongst hospitals, for increasing the incoming call centers to deal with all of the calls, up to and including now we're actually correlating the data on the calls relative to the propagation of the pandemic. And in many cases, we had to provide the same support to our customers to remotely connect their users through cloud-based platforms. 5,000 users in North America, 5,000 here in Europe. But probably, I think it was the simultaneity of all of those requests which required agility and the adoption of the tools and the adoptions. And even now, we're saying to ourselves, some of the good practices we did during this period, we have to retain them because we were able to do things so much faster than we normally do when we go through our standard processes.
Yeah, I think if anything, the pandemic has shown the importance of digital infrastructure, and we were in the midst of the 5G rollout. That has continued. It's hard to tell if that has gone faster. It's not gone slower. But I think what is really impressive is what I call still the network here, is to make sure that we continue to light up the 5G networks. But because if that anything that this pandemic has shown, it's needed. And it's not because 5G, we'd like to talk about it and it's a hype, etc. I think it's more, we've seen the big benefits. The question is how quickly will the adoptions of those capabilities be? And I think it's very clear through this pandemic that wireless, hence flexible, reliable, and secure connectivity, it's a requirement. It's increasingly so. I think one is now we move quite quickly overnight to work, to bring our work environment to home. But do we all have secure connectivity into our homes? Is that cloud environment fully secure, any fully secure cloud IT environment? I think that's something that I think quite a few enterprises may not have to think as actively about before the pandemic. And it's really clear, I think, if we look now going forward, that is crucial. If you stand up a testing station for testing against COVID-19, and you want access to patient's record in a safe manner, then you need to have not only the connectivity, but to Paul's point, also have the cloud and applications securely managed into that connection point. And that's what I call wireless agility, which I think both enterprises and now we also see consumers will expect, I think, going forward.
So do you think that we'll come to this pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic definition of connectivity or expectation of connectivity?
I think we have already accelerated some digital transformations that were already ongoing. I mean, I mentioned just to make micro examples with team adoption right within Ericsson, but I think this goes across. It goes across, my parents learning to run the online, buy the groceries online. Because now you're forced to do that. And I think it shows a shift, I think as important as technology, the shift in behavior, because now there was a burning platform. And I think that acceleration will not slow down. So I think trends that are already ongoing and transformation are ongoing pre-pandemic, they will probably have accelerated and become even stronger pandemic. And I think it's digital transformation that we expected to happen anyways, just that I think may happen a bit faster now.
Yeah, and Paul, do you see that same pre-pandemic versus a post-pandemic definition or expectation of connectivity?
It's been a real accelerator. I think on the one hand, it's shown, CIOs have become heroes overnight. Before they were cost centers, now they are actually business enablers. How long will that last? We will see. But infrastructure has been extremely important, and we've actually deployed more fiber connections to more sites in 2020 than we did in 2019, despite all of the constraints we had relative to the security intervention. So I think fiber now is a must. It's people want the 5G, the wireless, and they want the fiber to complement what's going on. I think what we have seen is that those customers who had already embarked upon a network transformation and a cloud transformation to a software-defined solution based upon products of our own or others, were in a much better position to deal with the problems and also then sustain it over time in a secure manner. I think probably a point we haven't covered so far is security. Security for me, a lot of people may have established quick and somewhat dirty solutions, but we know that will lead to increasing competency because we've seen a rise in the security ransomware attacks of all natures. So I think doing that quickly and in a secure manner and in a flexible environment, that is challenging. You need all three at the same time.
Has there been a rise in interest or deployment for SD-WAN?
Actually, if I look at the customer basis, you probably see two things which have not really been put on the back burner because, of course, with the constraints, but also the financial impact, anything to do with customer experience, so be it contact center or transformation, and anything to do with software-defined SD-WAN transformation, they are being given absolute priority by most of the CIOs as elements which are necessary in addition to, of course, all of the transformation on the user side. I've also heard some of the CIOs say, why did we have all of these user adoption programs which took 12 to 18 months when people were able to master the tools, as Oza said, with themselves on their own, in their home, within 2 weeks? Do we really need this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, from your perspective, how has that security question been answered?
I think the two parts. One is just the inherent enhanced security capabilities of the 5G architecture and how that standard is built. I think paves the way for more secure connectivity. And I think, just as Paul mentioned, I think a lot of people have not even reflected upon the implications of connecting on a Wi-Fi without security, and actually what all the applications you use can actually be exposed to a third party and maybe a malicious one. So I think there is, I think security together with, you can say, secure, reliable without trading off on the flexibility. Those characteristics that were already there with 5G just showed, you could say, even stronger product market fit, if I would put it that way. Yeah. With that said, we also have security solutions, and if I also look at Cradlepoint, which is one of the companies we acquired, also interesting during the pandemic, I led that acquisition completely remotely. It was another exciting, interesting experience doing remotely. But if you look at their product, completely cloud-based manager, which has a mobile SD-WAN solution, and they've had tremendous demand for their products, especially in the public safety. I mean, if you, just as Paul mentioned, both in when it comes to national health, but also other authorities, as well as many companies. And it's very much driven by the resiliency and the security. And we see that is rising. But it's one layer is the connectivity, but the other layer is as important is also the security of application and having a secure IT environment. And secure connectivity is one part of that. And I think this is where, for instance, Orange has a very interesting business portfolio, which they are helping solving that pain point for the enterprise customers.
Yes, I think this, the security solution has to be embedded into your products, has to be in the solution the customer has. We range from customers who are on the SOHO market to the medium size, to government institute, to worldwide companies and institutions, things like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs all had to set up contact centers to advise all of their inhabitants where they should go, who should they contact. So all of these elements were extremely important. And I think we start to see the value of all of these network solutions and the connectivity that this brings, because the amount of information now, the second phase was using the information. How do you use all of the information we collect on those mobile networks, to correlate that with pandemic information, to even come to the point we can tell stores, there's no point in you actually opening up at this point in time because there's nobody in there who's willing to go to the store. So there's no point in opening up the store. But if you open the store up at this time, we'll make sure that people are aware. So there's a whole even different way of communicating using this information, of course, respecting the privacy rules and anonymously. But a lot of that information is now being used in an effective manner. So it's been accelerator of the infrastructure, but also the data. And we have a very large subsidiary, Orange Cyber Defense, who are specialized in this particular environment, of course, threat detection and threat remediation. We have been very much, unfortunately, involved in helping customers who have been attacked, who have been subject to ransomware, and have many companies with lots seen of them. What do you do, and how do you continue to move forward? So, as the threat has increased on the pandemic side, the security threat has really significantly increased from everyone, and we see them targeting all segments of customers, small, medium size, town halls. Anyone is a game for them.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes one problem leads to the next, one problem multiplied by another. I'd like to ask both of you, though, about this extending this borderless enterprise concept with 5G. And of course, we're still early days with 5G in terms of rollouts, but how do you see this coming into play for this borderless enterprise?
Thank you. So I think to me, it's two aspects of the borderless enterprise. One is if we look at how the world has looked like so far, it's been a world where we have operators have been more consumer centric traditionally than enterprise centric. Enterprise has typically been the second one. We now see perhaps 10% of the operators globally are actually going seriously after the enterprise space, and Paul and Orange Business Services is one of those. But it's clear when we looked at it, we actually built networks for countries. And if you look at enterprises may not be, they typically, they're not bound to just one geography. And they sell products in different geographies. And I think one thing we haven't solved really today is if you want to just take a simple IoT application, you may need different product SKUs just to be able to connect your products in different parts of the world. So there, I think we have an opportunity, and there are forces now where we're trying to simplify that, where we can actually get more standardization. That's one aspect to me of borderless coverage, and where we can simplify everything from the commercial process to actually the service experience. So you can have network parity and actually the same experience, and hopefully with less stocks and different types of SKUs of your product to launch a service that's using connectivity that works in different countries. But I think there's another thing which I think about about borderless, and that is that you should be able to get that quality service anywhere, if you're indoor, outdoor, and that we can guarantee when with the capacity, the latency, the security level, fit for purpose when you need it. And this is where you have the power of network slices. The architecture, the standard is built for that. It's still to be commercialized in the industry, in the sense that it's practically and commercially available to enterprises, but also consumers. And that, I think, is a big opportunity for us. And I'm looking forward to see how we're going to develop and launch that in the market together with the service provider partners in the coming years.
Okay. And Paul, do you see this same concept of network slicing as a big opportunity for Orange Business?
I think it is an opportunity for us because we're seeing very different business models. If we can imagine tomorrow that in an industrial environment, you won't need the same decked environment in each site with a standalone equipment. You will have one single element which will pilot this, but you have got to guarantee the communication in a seamless manner with the highest level of quality between this. Or if we have a police force which requires guaranteed quality of service at all times, it will require these different things. Of course, the costs will be different. I think also associated with this, we have the edge. The edge is really evolving a lot, and the edge can be in the car. It can be an industrial plant. It can be a smart city. It can be any of these verticals where we want to generate it. So we're working with industrial partners who equip all of these elements. We have three focuses. One is on automotive, the other one's on industrial, and then we have smart cities. And sometimes it'll be, I would say, a local intelligent edge, which will then interconnect with the wider communication across the scale. But let's also remind ourselves that some of the devices we're equipping or implementing in devices here are things like cars. You will only install a wireless connection in a car when it's being manufactured. And it can be shipped anywhere in the world, and it can have different uses, and there'll be applications which the manufacturers will want to add on top of this. But it has to be a global, coherent solution which can last for 10 to 15 years with a service platform which can mediate all of these applications and elements. And this is where the power of a global partnership such as ours with Ericsson enables us to do this. And I think we're seeing a lot of traction in the market for these global solutions at the same time as we're seeing the edge solutions happen on the different sites. So I think it's quite exciting, and there'll be smaller, easier to develop perhaps local business models. But I think the best thing I would say is, I think it was a statistic I saw in 2025, there'll be more data generated by business endpoints than by the consumer industry.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I agree with you, Paul. I think it's also interesting if I look at the users that are on our joint global platform in IoT. It's really where we win a lot of business together is really on the global automotive. They have high demands, they want high quality, and they want the same quality service, and they want simplicity in the global management and operations. So you can say one part is really performance and consistent service experience, and we support and deliver that together with a one global core and bring the best of a global core and a local radio access delivery. And I think that's kind of where we bring the best of two worlds. I'm really excited where we're going to take that also with the 5G generation, which we're working on launching together. But I think it's proven the emphasis of both the performance, but also that simplicity that Paul was talking about. One global deal, one global partner. Now Orange is the global partner of several leading OEMs thanks to that partnership. I think the other part, which we have not seen today yet, and I'm really looking forward to, is besides the meeting the different requirements of different industries and settings that Paul described, my vision is that we can bring this capability, that specific slice of a certain SLA level on demand. So what if we could start activate that on demand? Now, I understand this requires 5G rollout to be a bit more mature, but I think Paul and I jointly have an opportunity to say, how do we use that technology, package that so it can actually be available on demand once we have the rollout to support that. And that I think is super exciting because they're bringing that user experience together with the network capabilities. And that's true flexibility.
Working that back into our theme of work from anywhere, work from home, when we have those kind of capabilities, do you think our experience, well, hopefully we're done with pandemics by then, but do you think our experience of work from home will be significantly better or different?
I think it can be a lot better given we had some network issues. Now I'm on 4G and not on 5G. It could be the reason. It would be good with some extra bandwidth and a bit, but that's one base. I think the one dimension that I think super relevant for working from home is the security level that Paul was talking about. I think that will be tremendously important. And you see that already now for mid and small size law firm, healthcare companies. It doesn't have to be super advanced for actually having a very high security need. And then you need to think that through when you have people working with sensitive information at home. So I think that's one. I don't know about you, Paul, if you have additional reflections on that one.
I think we can always do better. Now, what we're seeing is a number of points. One is an absolute acceleration of fiber. So people will want fiber as a same way they'll want electricity, and the same way they'll want 5G or 4G at the moment. They need both. They need both arms to work. And I think the way we put a capability to have the bandwidth on demand, because we're going to have basically different communities working from home. All of them need high bandwidth. Professional, teenagers, younger, they all need bandwidth. We need prioritization. So is prioritization locally? The idea is it separate subscriptions for the professional and the personal life? I don't think it's allowed, to be honest myself. I think it's just too much money involved in doing that. Can it be a combination of fiber with 5G? Probably. I think we'll come down to a question of performance. Absolute performance of the network, of who you're using. It's, of course, service, but it's down to the actual performance of the infrastructure and the products that people are using. And when they're satisfied with them, yes, they want more demand. They want more on demand. So the biggest request is, can I increase my capacity on my own, faster and simpler? In some cases, downgrade.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, I think we all have that desire for more bandwidth, and more bandwidth. So I'd like to thank both of our guests here today for your participation in the MEF's Infinite Edge series, and especially for your hard work in keeping everyone connected during the pandemic. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Asa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. I hope you're enjoying these conversations as much as I am. Lots of real gems from Paul and Osa on that last one. Loved it. They shared great examples of how their companies and their customers have rapidly adjusted to today's work from home, really work from anywhere environment. It was pretty awesome. But now it's time to push the edge with a little help from our esteemed analysts. They are no strangers to the MEF world, not at all, and really have a handle on what's happening in the SD-WAN space. I've got Aaron Dunn, Director of Research Services for Vertical Systems Group, and Rupa Hanachari, Industry Director, Business Communication Services and Cloud Services, ICT Practice for Frost & Sullivan. Over to you, ladies.
Hey, Rupa, how you doing? Good to see you.
Likewise, Erin. How are you?
I'm great. So after many years of MEF conferences in exotic locations, here we are in our home offices.
Virtual. Yep.
Pretty exotic, right?
Yep. I hope Nan and Stan are hearing and they choose some really exotic location to compensate for in 2022.
I'm thinking Hawaii. I mean, it's been thrown about before, so that would work for me in case they're listening.
Yeah, or Bermuda.
Bermuda
both are
works
great
too.
choices.
Anyway, a great segue into our first topic, which is how has COVID impacted the SD-WAN adoption, work from home adoption, and basically what's the path going forward? So I'm going to jump right in here. Throughout this MEF Infinite Edge series, you all in the audience are going to hear many deep dives from really great speakers on this topic. So what I'm going to do is stick with the numbers. In 2019, you can see on the timeline, we saw triple-digit revenue growth for carrier-managed SD-WAN services. In 2020, that slumped to 17%. Now, is 17% really a slump? No. But when compared to triple-digit revenue growth, we can call it a slump, I guess. Moving forward into 2021, we're seeing a revenue rebound as 2021 comes on and with the economic recovery. And all I can say is, come on, vaccine, it's time. We're ready. And so another point that I wanted to add here is when we asked in a mid-2020 survey about the post-pandemic outlook for SD-WAN, the top two responses that we got were, not surprisingly, accelerated enterprise IT and networking transformation and flexible work from home solutions. I have seen this rolled out in my personal life, in my work life, in all of my colleagues' work life. So I think it's a really interesting set of topics, and I'd love to hear what Rupa's research shows.
Great, thanks, Erin. I do have some numbers which I'll share in a bit. But we also did a survey in Q3 of 2020 to understand, how the tech priorities are changing for different businesses and what's the impact of COVID. And, not surprisingly so, some of the technology trends like hybrid cloud services, network and application security, and SD-WAN still ranked, 1 to 3 in that order. So, like I said, not surprisingly, because businesses had to re-strategize on where their IT investments will be. But some of these technologies are so critical to continue operating your business online and to enable your employees to work from home wherever applicable, that the priorities remain intact for these three. Another slide here shows the rise in remote working trends and how SD-WAN quickly adapted to that, right? I mean, who would have thought that vendors and service providers would actually be shipping out an SD-WAN appliance to a remote worker? But that's exactly what they did. From the CEO to the receptionist to the doctors, everybody had to start working from home. And it was so critical as you're trying to do this, you're trying to share bandwidth with your kids doing school from home, your spouse working from home, or somebody else streaming some videos. And SD-WAN was the perfect solution to basically ensure that business traffic gets prioritization, and it has some inbuilt security measures in it already, and the traffic is handled in an appropriate manner. So no one, Erin, I think you would agree that no one would have guessed that SD-WAN would so quickly become the choice of the solution for work from home solutions, but it did.
It did, and the fact that the overlay and the underlay is disaggregated, it just allowed these companies to pivot or move faster than we would have seen if this technology did not exist.
Absolutely. So I guess that brings us to the next topic of discussion here as to how important is hybrid networking, right? I mean, overlay and underlay and hybrid networking, right? Everybody was using broadband from home and their wireless phones basically to create a dual link SD-WAN circuit from their home office to connect to the data centers or cloud. So I think it's absolutely important that a managed service provider is chosen to kind of deploy this for enterprises. And there's another survey we did, Erin, and what we saw is companies who were working with a managed service provider, kind of adapted much quickly to the work from home situation than others, where even the IT staff was stuck at home, right? There's only that much they could actually do sitting at home. But if you're working with a managed service provider, they could take on this responsibility. So, this is known, this is not new information, but a managed service provider can basically take on the integration, the troubleshooting, and end-to-end management of the entire network for the IT teams. And hence, we've seen a major rise in managed SD-WAN services. What are your thoughts on that, Erin?
Well, I would agree. And I think one additional point that I'd like to make is that SD-WAN is a new and really interesting addition to the mix of VPNs that are already available out there, right? The market for, I'm going to say it, legacy managed VPNs, that including, MPLS-based site-to-site and some hybrid VPNs is $35 billion worldwide. That is a ton of revenue. Now, it's in decline, but you're still going to see a $30 billion market 5 years from now. The decline, what's it based on? As you just said, those folks are migrating straight over to carrier-managed SD-WAN services. So I think that's really interesting. So I hate saying, I said it before, but I hate saying legacy services because these technologies still have a huge impact on the market. MPLS, big play in hybrid services. Also one of the access technologies of choice for carrier-managed SD-WANs, right? You have broadband, you have DIA, and you also have MPLS. And also, it is still, and Rupa, I'd love to hear from you to see if your research shows something different. It is still the technology of choice for mission critical headquarter regional type enterprise installations because of the security. And what we found, and this is a neat topic that we've looked into, security in all of our research is a surprise with with SD-WAN, not a driver. If you're coming from a carrier managed MPLS service, the security was somewhat built in. You took it for granted, and now you can't. So that seems to be interesting for me. Site to site, these VPNs that have been around for 30 some years, mostly based on IPsec, they're still there. And again, in decline, but those little VPNs still work for a big segment of the market because they do what they need to do and nothing else. So I just want to kind of to pull out those couple of points.
Sure.
I also had one other thing. I do have a definition slide up there that Rupa and I have kind of scrutinized. And both of our carrier managed SD-WAN definitions pretty much agree to this image. Wouldn't you say, Rupa?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And it does line up with the MEF global standards. So the MEF likes to hear that. So I'm gonna toss over to you. Anything else to add to there?
Well, I just want to add one more point to what you're talking about. This whole install base of MPLS and IPsec VPNs and Ethernet we have, which is, even as per our estimates, it's around $30-40 billion market. I think, what's happening now is all of those revenues is not going to go away. It's just shifting, right? I mean, like you said, businesses are still using a combination of MPLS and Ethernet and DIA and wireless. And we did not touch upon this, but 5G, the impact of 5G is going to be huge. So I think still there will be a lot of wired, networking happening, but it's not new revenues. I mean, there was some new revenues in the beginning. There was an uptick for MPLS so that they can do the combination of MPLS and broadband, but I don't think there's going to be more new revenues, and there'll be huge price compression for sure. But anyway, that's the legacy services. I can't believe I'm saying that too.
Oh boy. But one more thing to add too, I think that a lot of folks need to remember when looking at this market is that when you look at the underlay and the overlay for carrier managed SD-WAN, the underlay, all those services you were just talking to, contributes about 50% of the overall revenue for this market. So again, not new revenue. Those pipes were most likely there. Maybe you're adding, maybe you're mix and matching, but that's already there. So not new revenue.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think this brings us to the next topic of discussion, Erin, about certification, right? Any new technology, there's a huge hoopla around it. And then things settle down and you're like, well, is it standardized? Is it certified? So I think MEF is doing a lot of work around that area. And from the discussions I've had with service providers and vendors, there is certainly a lot of value to it. So it will further drive up adoption for sure. Erin, just to kind of validate and further emphasize as to how big this market is, our estimates show in 2019, the global SD-WAN vendor market was $1.2 billion, and the managed SD-WAN services market was almost double that at $2.2 billion. And, over 350,000 sites operational today across the globe. And over 80% of those sites are managed sites. So that kind of, again, speaks back to what we were talking about, the importance of working with a managed service provider to help you do that. These are some of the stats. Erin, going back to the discussion on certification, what have you been hearing from your clients?
So we do test that on the enterprise side and on the services side, looking a little bit into how is certification, in this case from the MEF, valuable to your organization? And on the enterprise side, they're still unsure, right? This is relatively new to them, still trying to get their feet wet, and don't really have a big big statement yet on whether or not carrier managed certified services are important. Now, on the services side, that's very different. First of all, my company, we do these leaderboards. I know you all have seen them out there for many, many years. Our 2019 carrier managed SD-WAN services leaderboard, it was the first time we did it, new market. If you look at that, 4 out of the top providers are currently certified by the MEF. So this is great. And on the global side, we're releasing our first global SD-WAN leaderboard shortly. I wish we could have gotten this just a little bit later, then we would have had those numbers for you, but we don't. The reason I mention this is because SD-WAN, new market. Carrier Ethernet, been around since the early 2000s on the wide area side, and we've been releasing market share and leaderboards for this market for that entire time. Currently, they're 3/4 of the top US and global carrier Ethernet service providers are currently certified with the MEF. So if you use that as a leading indicator about SD-WAN, I think that we're going to see a lot more certifications. Also, those that 3/4, that big number of service providers generates about, 4,500 or so carrier managed CECPs. And, that's a lot of certified professionals. So I know the MEF considers this very, very important in its 2021 and future plans. And if we can use the history of Ethernet as any sort of indicator, I say that certified services and professionals for managed SD-WAN is going to be an important part of this market.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say on that. I don't know do you have anything more to add there before we?
Well, one last closing comment. I want to kind of echo what Rupesh said in episode 1, right? Who would have thought it? You and I have been in this industry, as analysts for
We've only been in this industry for at least for 5 years. 5 years only.
Yeah, that's how young we are. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So I will say networking is cool again. When was the last time you got so excited about what we are doing? When Ethernet happened, for sure.
Ethernet happened for sure. We had a couple of terrible dips, terrible ruts in this market. And now, again, it's cool again. And we brought in all of these new type of technologies, all of these new type of vendors, as you said, 5G. Now we got the wireless guys playing. It's interesting again. And I think the MEF, maybe this is a nice way to close it out, is sitting in a really good place right now to create the definitions and the language that unites all of these technologies.
I agree. All right, Erin, see you in Bermuda next year.
Yeah, we'll see you in Hawaii. It's fine.
Okay, either one is fine.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Erin and Rupa, for your keen analysis of the market. Once again, that topic of MEF 3.0 certification comes up. And in fact, 4 of the top 7 US market leaders are now SD-WAN certified. And MEF's professional certification is a key ingredient for that success. So now we've heard market insights from analysts and we've gotten executive perspectives from influential players, but we have not yet heard from MEF, our event organizer. And I think it's time that we do.
Well, I want to welcome Amir and Nan. It's so great to have you on this session. This is going to be a very exciting session. And really, I wanted to cover a couple of really major topics, especially around SD-WAN, SASE. It's some really hot areas in the market. End-to-end slicing, zero trust. These are really important areas. So what I'd love to know there, Amir, it's so great and privileged to have you. You're such a luminary and thought leader. And I'd love to know, the SD-WAN market has been super hot for quite a long time, continues to evolve. What are the key value points? What are the key, what's driving the market? What's the customer experience? And why is it so popular? Can you help me with that?
Well, that's a great question, Pascal. SD-WAN is something closer to my heart. I've been working on it for many years, and both from a provider perspective and just being a technologist and evangelist, this is something I've seen grown and really prosper over time. The market has really exploded, really. Over the last 2 or 3 years, customers have gone from just dabbling into technology, understanding it, to full adoption of the service. And it's moving quickly for many number of reasons, right? So one, at most organizations over a period of time, enterprise companies, they have to upgrade their hardware. At that point in time, they start to look at technology that they can use that will get them to the latest and greatest technology without the large capital outlay they will take otherwise. In the legacy world, they will have to buy a lot of network and do all these things themselves. Now they can relegate to an outsourced provider or a technology company that can give them all the benefits without the large capital outlay. At the same time, keep them up to date with refresh. So with SD-WAN, things like application-aware networking, more effective use of multi-cloud, multi-networking solutions, and really feature functionality that comes with it at a cost structure that is a lot different from just building big routers and switches into your data centers and managing it yourself and just staying up to date with technology. That's one of the reasons why customers want it. Second, there's a lot of options available for customers. Customers from a provider perspective, customers used to buy very, very heavy technology-centric solutions from telcos. And that hasn't changed much today. But what I am seeing right now is the customer's attitude is changing, where they want to use new technology as a backup solution, for example, right? When they need overflow on traffic, they would like to get something like SD-WAN in lieu of MPLS or IP and use that to maintain reliability and security at a different cost structure. So those are some of the reasons why customers really want to excel with SD-WAN, and they're adopting it.
But so really, there's a lot of features to SD-WAN, as you know, and I would love to know, from your point of view, what are these features that your customers are thinking they need today, and where do you see this feature set evolving in the future? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, please.
Well, look, being SD-WAN being a software native technology, and where the hardware and software are completely disaggregated, it allows for better application control, better integrated security. Customers have a choice to use their own security within SD-WAN or use whatever comes native with the SD-WAN vendor. Integration with hyperscalers, transport agnostic solutions, being able to get broadband on a large geographical spread of locations across multiple broadband vendors, but getting the same experience is important, and SD-WAN experience provides for that. Virtualization of networking, and really simple and consistent experience, regardless of the size of the organization, regardless of their mission and need. They will have a simple control that will allow them to manage their own applications if they choose to do so, and get a consistent experience that they get with hyperscalers today. I mean, most of their applications are actually moving to the cloud. If you look at a medium or large enterprise, 9 times out of 10, their ERP or CRM would be running in the cloud, and they would want connectivity to the cloud data center, and they want to manage it at their terms. They want to receive the right SLA, but have full control of their application. And SD-WAN, really enables that. To top that, global reach is an important factor. I mean, we've got many customers that we support who really want full global reach. I mean, we just sold a very large deal with 127 countries enabled on this type of a solution. And having the same experience, same control on your applications, regardless of underlying broadband, where we aggregate everything else and provide services to the customer. These are all the reasons why a customer want these type of feature functionality, and they will continue to evolve over time.
Yeah, you make a very good point. I mean, everything's going clouds, and wow, that's incredible how you have to manage so many countries, I guess, both from an overlay and underlay point of view. So yes, absolutely agree. This is there are many, many feature sets emerging that have to really solve a lot of points, and I think you hit it right spot on. So switching topics to Nan. Nan, MEF has been playing a significant role in SD-WAN. Why is this important that you believe MEF's embarked on this SD-WAN vision, and why is this so important to the members, both the end users, the service providers, the cloud providers? Like, where do you see the MEF's role in this whole area, please?
That's a good question. It's almost like at Carrier Ethernet, we are removing a market confusion will really allow SD-WAN market to grow faster and transform the entire WAN market worldwide. SD-WAN transformed current managed networks by allowing them to be application-centric software programmable, like Amir mentioned. Most of the service providers have significant investment and revenue tied to the managed services. An enterprise worldwide want the WAN networks to be application performance enabled, highly available, connecting to all kinds of destinations. 127, like Amir mentioned, including the cloud providers, and using a software programmable approach. MEF is a leading industry organization, really shaping the direction and growth of SD-WAN services. And through the standardization, certification of services, technology, and professionals. Dozens of MEF members companies and has contributed to the related standards development, as well as participating in the POC or certification of services technologies. Earlier this year, one of the largest buyer of connectivity services in the world called upon its suppliers to align with the MEF SD-WAN standards, which is a great thing. Really expecting a lot of enterprise to seek alignments, especially as more providers achieve the MEF 3.0 certification.
Yeah, so Dan, you've been the president for a very long time, I think from the very beginning at MEF. So you're really seeing this come a long way from basically, driving this Ethernet vision into the wide area network. And now you're seeing this, the next iteration of MEF is basically having this overlay model of SD-WAN. So kudos for you for keep driving this over and over and keep moving the vision and the ball forward in the market. So really, really good. So getting back to Amir, we talk about, this carrier Ethernet underlay, high speed and overlay, and then we're talking about automation, orchestration. What do you think about this underlay overlay model, Amir, and why is this so important to really get this, including the orchestration automation? Could you help us with that? I know Verizon has a tremendous amount of investment in the underlays and now in SD-WAN overlays. So great to hear your thoughts.
No, great question again, right? Look, this is all about scale. It's one thing to have technology that works perfectly. It's yet another ball game to provide scale in a consistent manner with the right experience, right? So to drive that scale, one need automation, and orchestration is really the key that drives automation for these services to be delivered across different networks. So whether it's wireless, wireline network, whether it's different countries, whether it's different broadband aggregation services that works, which are the underlay on which this overlay runs, it needs to be consistent. So we've invested a lot in our own orchestration engines, and we need to make sure that this is the engine that pulls together all components that support the management and deployment of the services. That is the key, right? So SD-WAN is just a way to get the services out there, but once you have software-defined networking in general, we need more standards on orchestration that everybody can benefit from. And a thing like having the right orchestration actually allows for faster integration of services across all type of network configurations, and it will also help enable use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, use of data into the network so that the customer experience, self-healing, and other things become much more prominent in what we do. So I'm a big fan of having the right level of orchestration and automation to help really drive these type of services forward.
To me, what we really want to do from MEF perspective is really trying to deliver end-to-end frictionless experience from device to application services, regardless the customer location or access devices. And an overlay model like SD-WAN really enables application performance management tunnels over any kind of underlay, regardless of wireline or wireless, with the requirement of many kind of digital services like AR, VR, and machine learning, like Amir mentioned. Will require a programmable overlay like SD-WAN with any link access underlays, whether it's a carrier Ethernet, 5G, IP, MPLS, IP broadband, to access the edge computing, the computing services. So that's kind of the way we see this transpired.
Yeah. So Nan, good point on a lot of your statements, man. What I think is real important, the edge is coming in. We're seeing this in droves, the distributed cloud. Everybody's talking about the edge. SASE is a really hot area. Zero trust, everybody's talking about identity and access control. And then also, MEF's been working on both SASE and zero trust, but we're also working on this universal SD-WAN edge for the clouds and the edges of the clouds and the edges of the service provider networks. Any thoughts in that area?
Yeah, it's a really exciting area. MEF has a dozen active SD-WAN SASE-related initiative to enable SD-WAN and SASE work together. Some of our key goals are to deliver market efficiency, establish a baseline set of expectations while encouraging innovation on top of that base, and to help the ensure service providers are in a better position to deliver type of solutions optimized for work from anywhere environment. With the emerging of edge computing being distributed to more locations everywhere, SD-WAN now really requires some level of minimal interoperability so that every edge and the cloud edge points doesn't require the implementation of every SD-WAN vendor's proprietary technologies. Now with SASE, our goal is really align the industry on a converged SD-WAN security and policy framework that can be used by enterprises and service providers to transform consumption of cloud services and application in form of SASE services.
Yeah, thanks, Nan. Amir, any thoughts on that? I know you've been driving, Verizon's been driving a ton of impact in the edges, and especially with some hyperscale cloud providers and all that. So how do you see this kind of SASE, universal SD-WAN edge, zero trust, all kind of come together with SD-WAN and so on? I mean, you're seeing it all, so I'd love to hear your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think Nan touched on a lot of stuff. The only thing I would add, if you look at the unifying characteristics of all the technologies and architectures, they're all software driven. They're all next generation technologies that run in the cloud. And by disaggregating the hardware from networking, we are now able to start doing far more interesting things with the network and its capabilities that we were able to do before. Things like better security, application-aware networking, where network is much more aware of application, and application is much more aware of network. So you got to tie these things together now. This also helps provide a much better secure experience on what I call network on demand or network as a service, secure service. Now you couple that with more slicing and prioritization, you've got a perfect world, right? Becomes critical when edge are completely distributed with applications running in the cloud, where edge applications have to become much more network centric and network aware, so they can respond to all the changes that are going to happen in the network. The network world is changing much faster than it had over the last decade. And for it to be successful, we need to make sure a perfect combination of the software technologies that enables this type of a change into the distributed hardware infrastructure that is out in the cloud now. So again, I would echo Nan's comments. There's a lot of technologies out there. The good thing is it's all software that could be managed perfectly now from cloud, and it provides for an opportunity to do seamless integration between software and hardware.
Yeah, and I think in our last episode, someone said networking is cool. And I love that because it really is. Networking is cool. I've been around for such a long time networking, and it's great to see networking is the underpinning for digital transformation. And it's not just networking, it's a very intelligent network, as we talked about with intelligence application policies and application awareness and security now and so on. So it's really great. So, there's been this drive with 5G. 5G is everywhere. Everybody's talking about it. And with 5G, we're seeing this concept of slicing. So, Amir, I'd love to hear your thoughts about, with what is slicing, and then how, we're working now in MEF on end-to-end slicing, and why is this important? Not just slicing in the 5G, but end-to-end slicing plays a very significant role, and somehow it relates to all of this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on end-to-end slicing.
Sure. Look, if you think about it, end-to-end slicing is not really a new way of managing a network. MPLS and SD-WAN networks provide at least some of this functionality already. However, 5G slicing just takes it to a completely new level, right? It provides for differentiated applications on the wireless link that gets mapped to what you might have on the wireline link. Because at the end of the day, at end of every wireless connection, at the back end, there's a wireline connection. And customer applications usually flow from an endpoint to your nearest edge platform, to a data center, your closed data center in the vicinity that you work in, all the way to a cloud architecture and cloud data center. And you got to map this thing end to end. So there's a ton of opportunity in that space. Customers do benefit from these new capabilities by being able to use the services much more efficiently and probably more important in much more secure fashion. Of course, the ability to use the available bandwidth more efficiently is obviously one of the key considerations here, because the notion of taking a portion of the network and allocating it to your most important function and dedicating it to you, whether it's going through wireless or wireline, is kind of a new notion. But this thing has existed in the past. Now we just have more use cases and the technology that allows for that ease of integration and deployment through a single provider with flexibility inside and outside the four walls that didn't exist. So with all these reasons, slicing is going to definitely differentiate us. It will help us manage the 8 currencies of 5G that we manage. We always talk about things like reliability, security, sensor densification, higher speed. I can go on and on. But being able to take an application that requires that special attention and being able to dedicate that network for a period of time on demand and have the customers provide the ability to use it and pay for it when they want it, that is not possible with network slicing.
Yeah, I think Amir covers most the benefit of slicing and why it's so important taking the actual end-to-end service to a next level with 5G. And in terms of the slicing from MEF perspective, and I think the idea really here is that enterprise could buy a set of several network slices like real-time, premium, for example, business or best ever standards, really regardless of the underlying transport technologies, including wireline and 5G. And this making buying underlying services very easy and simple. No more, there's a need to understand each of the underlying technologies and performance objectives they deliver. And these end-to-end slicing could really traverse the whole retail or wholesale transport network partner ecosystem to date, without dealing the exact configuration of different transport technology on partners' networks. So it's a really revolutionary. I think it's also important to recognize the network slicing. It's really a simple way for the first time in the industry we can potentially commercialize the slicing, the end of the slicing from 5G perspective as well as the end-to-end perspective, and give the users opportunity to be able to, like Amir mentioned, to map the applications to different slices and to deliver that kind of a quality service as well as the securities and to those applications for a period of time or on demand. So it's a really exciting area.
Yeah, very good points. Amir, congratulations. Verizon was achieved MEF 3.0 certification here just in January. And I'd love to know your thoughts of why is this certification valuable, the importance of it. Again, kudos to Verizon. So.
Well, thank you, Pascal. Look, I cannot overstate the importance of the certification. And MEF has a huge role to play in this. MEF has taken on the task of not only standardizing SD-WAN practice, but also allowing for interoperability between a standard understanding of SD-WAN, how it gets implemented in the customer environments within our partners and vendors. So it has taken a much more difficult task and made it simple and understandable by us, by our customers. So we have the same definition of what we are talking about. When you go out and sell these type of services, and you manage customer networks, it is important that we are talking apples to apples. So MEF has helped create that. We see a real value in in bringing this type of certification to our customers. And I tell you, I encourage everybody in our ecosystem, every provider, to actually pursue this effort, because it helps standardize an understanding of a technology that continues to change and evolve over time. It validates to our customers and vendors that the SD-WAN technology is actually supportable and sustainable into the future, right? So we talked about network slicing, we talked about getting SD-WAN to work with SASE or whatnot. It is going to get more and more complex because more and more functions are going to become available in software. And when you want to service chain all these things and have them work together, having one level of understanding and standardization and certification is extremely important. So, kudos to MEF for getting it done for everyone, and I'm very, very appreciative of all the support that we received in getting this standardization. So, thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Amir. I think everybody is contributing to the certification program, and for your leadership as chairman of the board here, Amir, I really appreciate your leadership here as well. I think that's driving the momentum of overall MEF 3.0 SD-WAN certification, both from services perspective and technology perspective. More than a dozen service providers and vendors has achieved the MEF 3.0 SD-WAN certifications as far. More are in the pipeline. This including, we mentioned earlier, Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, PCCW Global, Spectrum Enterprise, Telia, Windstream, Vodacom, South Africa, vendors including VMware, Versa Networks, and Neuraj Networks, and Fortinet, and InfoVista. So it's a great momentum. We see this thing going to continue to grow as we move on throughout the year.
Well, that's an incredible list. I'm amazed you remember all that. That's great. I actually think certification is very critical. We saw that in Wi-Fi, right? You never think about go anywhere and you buy Wi-Fi, everything just plugs and play and it works because everything's certified. I think it's a very important aspect. I actually believe in wholeheartedly. I'm glad MES has embarked in not only leading certification from Carrier Ethernet days, now adding to SD-WAN. And that leads me to the next question. Amir, we were incubating, this idea of SASE and with SASE, the security functions, and then, zero trust eventually will add to that. It's a very important aspect to identity access control. But how do you see, unlike the other way we did testing and certification, it could be one time and be done. But now with security, you always continuously have to test and certify because, malware and, cyber threats coming and they're changing all the time. So what's your thoughts on that? And how do you think, we go about that from MEF as we release these standards and certifications? What's your thoughts on how that will come about?
So Pascal, as you mentioned, the current incubation group is really focused on testing and certification of the application security part of the SD-WAN, right? So methodology for security testing, its life cycle, certifying functions like malware detection, removal, and URL filtering, or whatnot. When you think of SASE, it's something actually new, right? So in the industry, everyone is still trying to figure out what's the right definition of SASE, what that really means. From an operator perspective, from our perspective, SASE services are really expected to provide an optimal combination of networking and security for a given subscriber by really distributing the networking security functions dynamically across the SASE chain, across the SASE service path. Really, truly based on service provider and subscriber policies that could be dynamically arranged to provide security on a virtual network. So if you agree with that definition, then it can be used by the service providers and enterprises in a way where they can change the way things work on a service chain dynamically as they want through a policy change. So if you think of this, it does require a bit more work from both the industry and MEF to ensure that we are looking at it across the spectrum. The biggest challenge I see is there's no universally agreed definition, as I said, on what a SASE is. I mean, it didn't come out of like standards, so right? So there's no standard definition. But from our evaluation so far, I don't think a single provider of SASE can meet all the demands the customers are asking for. Because I go talk to a lot of enterprise customers about their view of SASE. I can tell you right now, everyone has a different definition. I'm also hearing from our partners, that their gear or their software is SASE-tized already, and it's a new way of pushing SASE in the industry, and that means there's a need for standardization. There's a need for us to get everybody together and make sure that we certify services, which is a combination of multiple things that I just talked about. As background, the various SASE vendors come from different origins, and based on that, either excel at networking or SD-WAN or security or zero trust. I haven't seen one that has all these elements, right? So when it comes to certification, we need to make sure that we've got a group that is well versed in all this and that looks at it across the SASE path, looks at networking, security, and all of these elements that, in my view, and in our customers' view, on what they're looking for. So it's going to be a long tail. There's quite a bit of work that's required, but I'm really, really happy that that's something MEF has taken up. And I think it will help drive standardization, collaboration, and a great customer experience, for that matters, for SASE services for our customers.
You make a very good point, Amir. SASE's now become the new buzz and the hype, and it's very confusing to really decode what is all the parts of that. I know Gartner defined it initially, gave some basic loose level definitions of it, but since then we've seen everybody jumping on the SASE bandwagon, and it's really hard to figure out and decode the parts of that, and then finally to get the common vocabulary, terminology, and then certification. I think you're right. It's a long tail approach, and or it's going to be a long tail journey for us to get on and to get the industry all agreeing and finally standardizing. But great news that MEF is well down the path. We're doing a lot of work in both SASE and zero trust, and I'm really excited when we finally get to certification. So thank you, Amir. Nan, we talked about certification in services and product, but MEF's been doing a lot on professional certification. So what's happening on that front? Can you help us?
Yeah, it was really exciting to hear that a lot of people are very, very much interested in the professional certification. I think, as we have over 6,500 CECPs certified. Building on top of that, and as of this week, we have 488 MEF certified SD-CP, so-called MEF SD-CPs. That's come from nearly 100 companies in over 33 countries. So it's a not only just the technology and service certification and making a wave in the industry, but the professionals are really taking the industry by storm in terms of the SD-WAN. So we see an incredible momentum in professional certification.
So look, hey, Nan, Amir, I work with you in the MEF. You're at the board level. I work with you, reporting to you guys at the board level. And it's always such a pleasure working with you guys, the industry luminaries. And also, it's so amazing. The board is, someone talked about, it's like being inside the Justice League of America. And not just America, we're from all over the world, but it's literally, you guys are like the superstars of networking, the Justice League, I think someone talked about it. So it's really a privilege to be with you guys on the board and the CTO of MEF. So with that, I want to thank you for their time and for this session. And I'd like to thank all the audience. So take care.
Thank you, Pascal.
Thank you, Pascal. Want to be like you, rock star.
Gentlemen, thanks for those very astute perspectives. I'm sure our audience will have a few follow-up questions for you guys in the chat. Man, that certification theme keeps coming up. Congratulations not only to the certified service and technology companies, but also to the hundreds of SD-WAN certified professionals employed by 100 plus companies around the world. So much incredible information and insight so far, and so much more to come with our 3 deep dive sessions. In just a moment, we're going to pause for a short bio and refill break. But first, just a quick word about the MEF 3.0 live POC showcases coming up in February. We'll see you on the other side. Don't forget to register for the MEF-POCs at mef.net/POC. Sounds like an awesome program showing some really cool things. Well, thanks for joining me back on the edge as we prepare to take our first deep dive of the day. And I promise it won't be scary if we all jump together. And I think our sketch artist Matt might be jumping in here too. Our first session is delivering on SD-WAN expectations, application performance, visibility, control, and security. Partnering with us to bring clarity, strategy, and expertise, please welcome John Ish, Director Connectivity Solutions for Orange Business Services, as well as Peter Kopens, Vice President of Product Portfolio of Colt Technology Services, and Willie Guru, Manager of Product Development of T-Mobile. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Awesome.
Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome. So good to see all of you. And thanks for starting us off with this episode of the Deep Dive session. So let's jump in. Let's get us started. If you would, please, Peter, John, and Willie, could you briefly share a highlight of your professional role as well as your company's approach to SD-WAN?
Sure. So I'm the VP product at Colt. So includes a complete product lifecycle from innovation, understanding the requirements, and then the development and the launch of the capability. So Colt has a portfolio of traditional network services, think optical wavelength, Ethernet, internet access, voice services, and then also the newer software-defined networking-centric services, like SD-WAN being one of them. So Colt, at least in Europe, was one of the early movers on SD-WAN with the launch already over 5 years ago now in what I would call a true SD-WAN from day one, based on a generic wide server as a CPE box, central control, and full visibility. And maybe to finalize, SD-WAN at Colt today is our fastest growing network service in our complete portfolio. And it's one of the services where customers and the market are pushing us rather than we having to push the market.
Thank you, Peter. John, jump in for us.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a director of in our connectivity business unit here at Orange Business Services, and much like what Peter just said, the customers are definitely driving in this direction with SD-WAN. We offer SD-WAN in two flavors. We have a fully managed service and an integrated service. The fully managed service is integrated into our global MPLS network. And we have something called the Next Gen Hub where we integrate underlay, overlay, and internet services all in the same spot. Our intent is to provide a seamless integrated network that integrates between the private network, the internet, security, and cloud. You can't talk about SD-WAN without talking about those other four things. Our SD-WAN business today represents something around the neighborhood of 12,000 ports, and we have more than 50 global networks installed today.
Hi, I'm Willie Guru. I'm a product development manager at T-Mobile in the T-Mobile for Business space. Our SD-WAN offerings primarily have been CPE-based, managed CPE-based up until probably the past year. And like most companies, our focus has started to shift towards work from home and work from anywhere, and how we can leverage the 5G networks in the what I would call beyond the core offering of mobility.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. So Peter, I'm going to jump back to the front side and with yourself. If you could share, how would you characterize key enterprise requirements in today's work from anywhere world?
Yeah, sure. And I think Willie already touched on it. So for a service like SD-WAN, that's not that old, 6-7 years ago, no one was talking really about it. The main drivers have evolved quickly. First, it was about cost, replacing MPLS to small exotic places. That was the idea. Then it became cloud native, MPLS not being designed from the start to break out locally the traffic going to the public cloud. Then it became security. And now, of course, in the last 9 months, we have seen definitely another driver, which is the work from home. Before the whole pandemic, the focus of SD-WAN that we did see was definitely mainly on branch sites, headquarters, data centers, the cloud. And home users were part of it, but it was not really central, if I'm honest. If you see now, of course, the massive move to work from home, I haven't seen my office in the last 9 months since March. I haven't been there, and I know probably a lot of you are in the same situation. So a lot of companies had to overnight change it. They have done it, but in some cases, it has been a quick and dirty fix, not a sustainable long-term solution. And now we see a lot of enterprise demand for a more scalable, solid, long-term work-from-home solution embedded in SD-WAN. And that could be both based on tunnel or software client version, or even making the home office as a real branch site. That's not the majority of demand, but still, that's something that we now see having like a branch at home. So definitely, and we come back later on, I think, on all the security requirements that will drive.
And I think, Peter, if I could just jump in there, one thing that you talked about, I definitely see is this kind of, when the pandemic first hit, it was sort of like, hey, make sure everybody can work from home. It was a quick and dirty and get people there. But now we're getting to the point where, the end users aren't accepting that anymore, right? It's not just a month, it's just not just 2 months. If this is going to be a long-term situation, I need to be able to print at home. I need you to be able to help me when I have a problem, not just say, oh, the tunnel's down. So I definitely agree with you that's there's been an evolution of how to get people to work from home and how comfortable they are with it.
That's a great add-on, John. And Willie, I'm going to jump to you, then I'll do a follow-up on Peter on this one. So let's change slightly. How would you share, Willie, is your company delivering on enterprise SD-WAN expectations? An example being, what is your company doing to help customers deal more effectively with changing modes of network consumption?
Well, and these questions are certainly feeding on each other very well.
They are. Almost like we planned it, right?
As Pete, who wrote these things? This is great. As Peter and John just said, I mean, it's a very interesting thing. SD-WAN has always been, that overlaid network. The carriers have adopted kind of an underlay agnostic approach, and now that we're moving into the work from home, it becomes a little bit more difficult to treat that work from home or work from anywhere user as a branch location in an SD-WAN environment. So I think the push going forward is going to be, like John said, is how do you do that in a way that makes that mobility user, or makes that, even if it's fixed like your house, you're always going to be in one spot. But how do you make that 5G connection a legitimate citizen on an SD-WAN network? How do you treat it like a branch? How do you apply business policies? How do you apply security? How do you adhere to the visibility requirements from the CIO to all of his assets out in the field? So moving in from where we were last year of, let's just make this thing work, of getting everybody connected to a network, to, okay, now with the rollout of 5G, with the expansion of the 5G networks, how do we turn those 5G users into legitimate citizens in an SD-WAN world?
Yeah, no, I can fully agree. And I think maybe another aspect, so getting a bit away from the work from home, is the whole operational models. That's definitely something. If you looked in the past with MPLS-based IPVPNs, the operational model was very crystallized. At least in Europe, over 70% of the enterprises went for a fully managed MPLS network from a network service provider. So an out-tasked kind of model. In the US, it was traditionally a bit less, but still important. Now, operational models on SD-WAN, the fact that we have now this underlay and overlay enabled due to SDN and network function virtualization opens up a whole host of new operational models. Do-it-yourself, enterprise that do both underlay and overlay themselves. Co-managed, where the operator provides the whole infrastructure, keeps it up and running, but then the enterprise can quickly change firewall settings, load balancing, etc. And then fully managed. And at the moment, we see a lot of these models, a lot of hybrids there. It's not fully converged yet, and mostly driven by two things. Does the enterprise have the IT resource and the skills in-house to do it? And is it for them, for the company, is a network a differentiator? Or is it just, it's always important, but is it just supporting or real differentiator? From a Colt perspective, we're agnostic in this, but it's definitely something that we see happening.
It's interesting. We've always kind of treated, the SD-WAN networks as a managed solution. The highest amount of growth has been in managed SD-WAN over the last couple of years. John touched on something a minute ago with the scalability piece of this. When we've looked at SD-WAN in the past and managed CPE devices, that is a completely different proposition from managing the masses. We're going from a scalability of just enterprise locations to now needing to manage millions of subscribers that all come into a network. So how will that shift happen? How will we go from a managed type of solution to a much greater scale of millions of subscribers coming into a network, coming into an SD-WAN network? I think the direction needs to be more of a self-service type environment where a user can come in and set his business policies. Or the admin for the enterprise, for instance, could come in and set the business policies, set the rules for those subscribers, so we can continue from a scalability perspective to meet their needs.
Awesome. John, did you have one quick thing to add in there? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Willie, Peter, and I are definitely working in the same space. Because I hear reflections on exactly what we're seeing with our customer base. So just wanted to say that.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Willie, I got two short ones for you. Then John, I'm going to flip the screen to you for a little while. But Will, if you could share, will advancement of broadband services and 5G facilitate the move away from branch-centric networks and really force carriers to accelerate network transformation?
Absolutely, and this is exactly what we've been talking about. You know, the promise of 5G is bandwidth and latency, or lower latency. You know, so we're going to see a shift in the traditional access methods. You know, going away and moving more towards a wireless 5G type of environment. Broadband has already pushed us there to a degree, with cable operators and fiber operators to deliver broadband to the small business, to the branch locations, and even to the homes. 5G is just going to accelerate that even more. You know, so both of those two things are absolutely catalysts to moving away from traditional networks and transforming what we offer to our customers. But you can't say that these days without also saying exactly what we've been talking about with 2020 and the pandemic and this sudden need, you know, to move everybody out of the office and into their work environment now being either, you know, work from home or work from somewhere other than the office, right? And from all indication, I don't believe that's going to change. Even post-pandemic, I believe we're going to see a percentage of the people that used to work in an office working from home, or at the very minimum, you know, some type of schedule that an employer brings in part of his employers, you know, into the office on a scheduled basis. So I don't think you're going to see the capacity of people in offices that you once had, and I think we'll need to be able to supply that work from home type environment going forward.
Absolutely, you're going to need to supply. So well said. Well, then continue on, Willie, for a moment. You know, SD-WAN originally was viewed by many as an end to MPLS. Then it was positioned as a way to augment MPLS. Are we moving back to it and replacing MPLS in 2021 with 5G broadband and SD-WAN?
This is probably the hardest question for me to answer, simply because I've been the one trying to sell MPLS networks for the last 20 years. You know, it's not that there's anything wrong with MPLS. There's nothing going on there that would say MPLS is still not viable. It absolutely is, and it is still the best way to have a secure, high-performing network. The fact of the matter is, the workplace has changed. You know, for the last several years, we have been decentralizing the compute power in the network, moving applications into the cloud, now moving applications with MEC to the edge of the network. So as those applications decentralize, you know, we're going to see the need, and I think Peter said this earlier, we're going to see the need to move away from an MPLS network, because it's simply not what an MPLS network was designed to do. MPLS is a closed network. It's a private network. And that's just really not the direction that the industry is going from a compute perspective. You know, so I think we'll see MPLS slowly going away. I think what you'll see is you'll see more and more access from a broadband and a 5G perspective coming in at the access layer, and you'll see your larger locations, your regional and headquarter locations, continuing along with the MPLS networks for a period of time. You know, ultimately, I guess you could say we would all just have a 5G subscription for our access, and we would all be our own private networks, and all the applications would be in the cloud. I don't think that's going to happen within a year or so. I think that's still years away.
Oh, and I like how you said it, Will. You've been trying to sell it for years. That's why I addressed the question your way.
Yeah, don't take away my MPLS.
No,
just
not
yet.
a chance. Not a chance. How about this, John? I'm putting you in a spotlight for a few questions. Sure. We're coming right at you. So, John, help us understand, how is SD-WAN application visibility and control changing network design and operation?
Right. Well, I think this goes exactly to what Willie was just talking about, right. Is that what we've seen is this migration away from a data center centric environment to a cloud centric environment. And actually in the beginning days of SD-WAN, we did not have that, right? All we had was the idea that I could save money by moving to SD-WAN, in removing MPLS. And we honestly, to Willie's point, we did not see that happen largely within our customers, with even those that rolled SD-WAN out, that they moved away from MPLS. Now, I agree with Willie that as you get further into cloud and decentralization of compute, you certainly are going to see a difference in how that operates. And what that means from an application performance perspective is, in the past, number one, the destination was probably the data center. So I might have multiple ways to get to the data center, but I'm going to the same spot. So I didn't have to worry so much about how I was getting there. And as well, the methods I could use to make those adjustments were pretty rough, right? I could do IP address or maybe port kind of stuff to make decisions about where I send applications. Now I have not only my applications live in a different environment, they live in the cloud, which is probably not under my 100% control, but also I have the ability with SD-WAN to make those routing decisions much deeper into the application. So the classic one is Office 365. Well, Office 365 is a combination of applications that are real time and those that are not, right? So even within that Office 365 environment, I don't need to treat everything that's happening there the same. I can treat it differently. And I can do that with the application control within SD-WAN. The other important thing, of course, is that by adding the orchestration layer on top, I can do that in a much more quick fashion when I need to change something in my environment. In the old days of PBR, if I had 100 routers, I'd have to make 100 changes. And yeah, I can do scripting and some things to make that simpler, but orchestration makes that instantaneous. Now, I'm not saying our customers necessarily are reaching that instantaneous change constantly kind of mode, and I'm not sure that IT is really ready to handle that, but it's capable and it has expanded the abilities of application performance management within your network.
Thank you, John. I'm always curious when people talk about the old days and 100 changes and 100 routes. And the old days really aren't even that. They're like, how many years ago are the old days anymore?
Yeah, that change has certainly accelerated. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, John, let's stay with it for a moment. Share, how can SD-WAN help with application performance and the cloud, and what are really the restrictions you see?
All right. And so some of these restrictions are based upon the SD-WAN technology you're using. Some SD-WAN technologies require two ends to it. So your overlay has to have a box on the far end in order to do any kind of application control. There are others that, you can do it from one side. So to some degree, and I'm not, in this short format, I don't have time to go into all that, but there are some differences there. But the other, I think one of the critical things that I see, or one of the conversations we have with our customer, and this is specifically or mostly when we're talking about infrastructure as a service, which I see a lot of customers, that's a big engagement with our customers right now, is doing more infrastructure as a service in the cloud, is the decision about where does my overlay end. Is it going to end inside the cloud service provider, or I'm going to end it at the edge before I go into the cloud service provider? And we've done both ways. I would say most of our customers are choosing to end the overlay before it goes to the cloud service provider. So we're essentially in one of those cloud gateways that we have, the next-gen hubs. We'll terminate the overlay network there and then just connect, even if it's a private connection, into the infrastructure as a service provider. Now, I'm not saying every customer is like that. We certainly have launched the virtual instances of SD-WAN gateways inside the cloud service provider. When I talk to cloud service providers about this, they would much rather not have the overlay exist inside their environments because it's defeating some of the routing sitting there. But that's part of the conversation we have with a customer is, let's talk about what these mean, what it means to where your overlay ends, and how is that going to impact your design of the overlay of the overall network.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Peter, I didn't forget about you, so I'm going to jump back to yourself, but John, I'd also like a follow-on this question, if that's all right. Peter, security has emerged as a top priority for those evaluating SD-WAN solutions, of course. What are the key issues that we need to consider when it comes to SD-WAN and security?
Yeah, sure. So I think the drivers are clear. We have been talking about it. The whole work from home is changing the perimeter. And then the whole cloud-centric IT environment means that you break out from your network to the cloud And that again is changing all your traffic flows. So that old concept of point solutions and individual firewalls with individual, as John was saying, all these policies that you had to manage, that doesn't cut it anymore. So now it's much more about an individual user accessing a specific application across wherever he is. And what we then see is that we see a few things. First of all, security gets much more bundled into SD-WAN than it ever was with MPLS. With MPLS, as was said before, was mostly a closed network, so there was much less need for that security because it was an internal network primarily, not exclusive, but primarily. So with SD-WAN, it's much more prominent. That's one. SD-WAN vendors and security vendors, they are converging. That's what we definitely see in the market. They all have, they're all starting to play in each other's area. And then what we see from customers is that we have to offer choice here. It's not for some things like routing, customers don't care in general what you offer as long as it's something good. With security, it's more sensitive, so they want to hear some names. So, for example, we have some SD-WAN vendors. They have embedded security, and that's a good solution for a lot of customers. Some other customers like to have Checkpoint or Palo Alto or Fortinet, and they dictate a bit their requirements there. And that's something we then have to enable as a universal CPE concept, that on top, this Checkpoint, Palo Alto, Fortinet, we can deliver as software applications on that generic platform.
Yeah, in that early on in our SD-WAN journey here with customers, we learned that you cannot have an SD-WAN conversation without a security person in the room. I mean, you can, but you're going to have that conversation again, later on down the road when you do that. So that's definitely part of it. Everything Peter said is, 100%. I agree with it. The one thing I would add to it is that what we're seeing as a trend within our customers is historically IT and security operated in sort of two different domains. They had their own idea of what things were going to do. And as this work from home, as SD-WAN, as orchestration has become more relevant with our customers, those two organizations have to work closer together. And it's something that, I can't walk into a customer and say, hey, you got to get your security and IT teams together. But I do, when we walk in and talk about that, we do say that is a key to getting the most out of SD-WAN, the most out of your security. They have to work together. If you look at those in isolation, you're going to miss out in some way. I guarantee it.
You're right. Thank you, John. So before we wrap up, I have one last question for all of you. We'll start with Willie, then go to Peter, end on John. Keep it tight. One thought answer if you can. But tell me, what can enterprises look forward to in terms of SD-WAN innovation in 21?
Well, I think a lot of what John and Peter were just saying is very applicable here. I hope what the audience is hearing here is, we're at that stage with SD-WAN that we are moving away from a CPE type environment totally to at least part of those solutions being in the network. As Peter said a while ago, there's multiple breakout points within the network. So there's on-ramps, there's off-ramps. There are security concerns all along the way. And then as John was saying, with how he develops his SD-WAN solutions with infrastructure as a service, there are multiple ways of doing that, but parts of that SD-WAN solution, as most of us predicted, were originally out on the customer prem, and now part of that network is moving inside the carrier's infrastructure.
Yep. And I can add on that. So obviously it's about further expanding the work from home and the security / SASE capabilities beyond what's there already today. And then what was just said, it's also about further going on that whole journey of virtual network functions, so software functions that can live or on the universal CPE, which is at the customer side, or it can live, as was just said, in the network, on a network node, on a server farm. And so here we're thinking about all the stuff like firewalls, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, routing, Cisco, Juniper, WAN optimization, Riverbed, and a very, very long list of other capabilities.
And the only thing I would add to that is, again, it's amazing that Willie and Peter and I, everything that we've said is I feel good that I'm hearing exactly what I would have said. There's nothing that is contradictory. But the only other thing I would add to this is segmentation. I've seen we're starting to see our customers think about, okay, I've got SD-WAN deployed. How can I segment my network? And it goes into the SASE model. It goes into this whole concept. But I actually have a customer who's trying to break the entire network, right? So I want east-west security on every connection. And that's a little bit odd for us who have been in the industry a while and thinking about MPLS, any to any. You're inside the network, you're outside the network. Those concepts are going away. And it's more about how do I secure my entire network regardless of where I am in the network.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. I know it was great information and great expertise to be shared with our entire audience here watching. So if you could give him a big round of applause, folks. And once again, thank you to John Ish, Orange Business Services, Peter Copens, Colt Technology Services, and Willie Guru from T-Mobile. They're going crazy for you. Can't you hear them? Can you guys hear them? they're tearing up the chat stream right now. You guys have been fabulous. They are. Hey, everybody, don't go too far as we have Deep Dive Session 2 coming up shortly on evolving SD-WAN as a transformation enabler. And we will see you there. See what happens when you fearlessly jump into the deep end? You get some of the best content of the day. A special shout out to John, Peter, and Willie for their take on the impact of SD-WAN and how service providers are delivering on SD-WAN expectations and next-gen services. Well, ready for more? Here we go for the next deep dive. Evolving SD-WAN as a transformation enabler, virtualization and automation at the edge. This is a great deep dive session. You're joining us, and please welcome to the screen Jack Pugacheski, Distinguished Architect of Lumen Technologies, MEF Distinguished Fellow, Gabriela Laghi, Head of Edge Automation and Virtualization Engineering at Sparkle, and Marc Boutier, Head of Virtualization Solutions of Econops. We've got a global audience joining us from Italy, from France, and from Minnesota here domestically. So, gentlemen, if you don't mind, to start us off, and we'll go in the order of Jack, Gabriela, and Marc, could you give us a quick overview of your role and how you're supporting your company's SD-WAN related initiatives?
Sure. Jack Pugacheski, Distinguished Architect at Lumen, and I am also working, or my main responsibilities are API development at MEF and bringing those APIs into Lumen to help in our digital transformation.
Hi, my name is Gabriele Laghi and I work in the engineering department of Sparkle. Sparkle is a team group company with the objective of developing international sales and retail businesses. And we are in the team group, and we are a business unit for the provisioning of international service.
Yes, myself, Marc Boutier. Good afternoon. So I'm part of Equinox company. So I'm in charge of the overall product strategy for Equinox in terms of virtualization. So that's encompassing both the SD-WAN portfolio together with Universal CPE, NFVI, and what we call as well on our side the Compose Management Stack, which is basically all these APIs that managing our own solution. So very pleased to attend today.
No, and thank you all. We're pleased you're here with us as well. So let's kick in. Gabriela, I'll start with yourself, and Marc, I'd love a follow-on to this. If you could share with us, how do you see new variables of digital transformation driving the industry toward SD-WAN, and how does that impact the way networks are being built?
Well, from an engineering department point of view, let me say that the common networking approach we have seen many years since the consolidation of IP MPLS solution has been based on a design solution between customer premises, focusing mainly on pure connectivity and segregation feature. Let me say we have been focused on market standards like IPVPN over MPLS, IPsec over Internet, and but is for many years the kind of solution that fit properly on the context. But that approach has been absolutely right, also with on-premises data center application. But with the advent of new variables of digital transformation, things are changing now. and the pure technical networking with CLI configuration is not enough. The top factors that are mainly changing the paradigm of let me say, cloudification of application, the security in the cloud that is having a very disruptive evolution if compared with a simple network traffic segregation or basic firewalling features. Consequently, let me say that there is a rising needs for flexibility, rapidity or configuration, application flow implementation and policing are a must in this environment. Also, assurance and monitoring is something perceived as pivotal for customers because on extranet connectivity depends the basic functioning of a company. Let me say that in this new context, we have a very great expectation for a much more controlled view, and we think that SD-WAN is the architecture that fits properly in this context.
As said by Gabriele, the transformation of the way the IT is consuming now this underlay, which is much more related to application rather than network. So most of the people now are no more talking about network, they are talking about application, they are talking about consuming cloud services. So that's something which really impact below all the way the infrastructure has to be built in order to be able to address this kind of needs. And how do you manage this kind of flexibility? And this definitely also where we truly believe, and I think we share Gabriel's view in that approach, is all the automation which is going around this kind of solution make a lot of sense, because it has on one side, of course, to simplify the way the IT people is working and consuming the network today. But at the same time, from a service provider, it has also to consolidate how it delivers the services, and both from an overlay perspective, so SD-WAN if we want to call it simply, but also from its underlay perspective, and how it will dimension and engineer its network based on the different behaviors of the consumers, which are changing quite drastically. And we see that as well now with security. In the past, security was either not treated or treated at the edge. Now we treat that in the cloud. So that means even more workload on the network, and even more automation to ensure that this security is also a fully integrated component out of the solution and for the service provider building their own infrastructure.
Thank you, Mark. Gabriele, I want to jump back for a moment. Why is centralized resource management, why is it so important in a hybrid connectivity and multi-cloud environment?
Well, let me say that in an hybrid resource context, private and public elements mix, but remains with the same top priority level of attention because they are components of the same engine. Moreover, the public environments are dominated by over-the-tops is a set of multiple complex solution offers depending on the parameter applied, like cost, features, supported software, and even specific hardware. See, for example, the hardware GPU specialization that we are seeing for application like artificial intelligence and so on. So as you can imagine, a mix of these things produce a spider web context, more or less, in which a centralized smart resource management tool like SD-WAN is pivotal, in my view, for understanding how strategically and, let me say, tactically manage the network and its heterogeneous resources.
Thank you. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to stay. Gabriele and Mark, I've got a couple questions. Jack, I haven't forgot about you. I'm going to get to you. I got lots of questions for you coming up here as well. But again, Gabriele, I want you to continue, and then Mark with a follow-on. How do you see virtualization and automation impacting the evolution of SD-WAN, especially as a transformation enabler?
Well, all these SD-WAN components that we have seen are not alone in a service provider architecture, but they fit inside an architecture which we can refer to the MEF-CECP LSO architecture, just to have a view. SD-WAN is one of the orchestrator technologies that integrates in this big picture of the LSO architecture for network automation virtualization. Moreover, automation needs, as usual, a standardization like what we have done in MEF with MEF-17 service attributes and service definition, MEF-82 service modeling work, or also like the SD-WAN certification, These are all tools, guidelines that represent the right tools for reaching this target of standardization. Moreover, virtualization is something integrated in SD-WAN, let me say. Virtually, SD-WAN in private or public cloud represent an essential element to be orchestrated for reaching an overall view of application. All this part should work in cooperation with, obviously, with BSS and OSS components of the architecture, but moreover, also with third parties, as we said.
Yeah, so as a solution of NFVI as well and virtual edge, so that's something that we see, of course, a lot more demands coming in, because we know that the origins of the SD-WAN was coming with physical appliance. And we know how it could be complex for a service provider to manage a large variety of appliances, and especially because we know that there is no SD-WAN fitting all the needs of their customers. So this is where we truly believe that a UCP approach, virtualization approach at the edge, also brings some value to the SD-WAN, enabling the service provider to provide the right SD-WAN to its customers. But at the same time, for him, of course, it's also a challenge, because from an API perspective, as mentioned by Gabriel, you have to be sure that you will be able to adapt and to deploy such environment quite easily. So, of course, on one side, you add a bit of complexity by using virtualization at the edge. On the other side, you give a lot of freedom to the service provider to speed up the deployment of SD-WAN and to be sure that finally it won't be dependent of the physical appliance. And for him, as said also by Gabriel, streamlining the delivering process of the SD-WAN. On the other side, as you mentioned, as an SD-WAN supplier, we are touching the virtualization in the cloud. And that's also something which is very important. How do we deliver services from the cloud, and how a service provider can automate the deployment, a simultaneous deployment from the edge to the cloud to provision the overall infrastructure in order to deliver these services. And that's definitely where, of course, the MEF and all these standardization API make a lot of sense in order for the service provider to be able to address this market and to gain this flexibility to deliver the solution to the market.
Awesome. Mark, continue for me for just a moment, and Gabrielle will come back. Share some examples of your customers or your own company's experience with SD-WAN.
At the end of the day, the really important stuff behind the SD-WAN story is this ability to deploy easily. And that's something which is very important. It's clearly an enabler for the SD-WAN. But what we have seen, compare beside the marketing term to say, yeah, everything is zero touch, it's easy, you can do whatever. As soon as you have to insert a new edge into a network, it's never as simple as it seems. So, of course, from an OTT player, that's look good. And it's a good marketing argument. But as soon as you have to insert an edge doing routing into a data center, into an edge, it's not that straightforward, to be honest. So you have to spend a bit of time, and it's still for the moment a project-based approach. And that's also why SD-WAN have some challenge to enter into the mass market at the end, is because each deployment remains a unique deployment. So of course, on our side, we are working to standardize as much as we can, and we have some value out of our portfolio to do these kind of things. But beside that, that's also not only our solution, that's the overall process from the service provider to be able to streamline this deployment from an end-to-end perspective, and not only from the customer. But trust me, deploying SD-WAN, it's nice on paper, doing a POC, connecting to a cloud infrastructure where you show things very easy. Deploy a bit more than 3,000 sites within 6 months, that's a different story. And the SD-WAN is not the most complex one out of it. You can be sure of that.
Mark, that is from the vendor side, let me say that what we learned from a service provider point of view from vendors is the simplification that SD-WAN brings with its application. And what we have done in our use case is that we started for simplifying our own network. So our first use case was applying SD-WAN to our internal connection network, and it's a worldwide network for controlling our own network elements. And let me say, it's a very simplified network with all the characteristics of resiliency, multi-access underlay, security component, but obviously, and with a very simplified view, as Mark said. We have applied this SD-WAN solution to a network of about 75 network management premises, a couple of data center. And let me say, on this component, with this experience, our aim is to have a real training for our enterprise market with SD-WAN solution.
Awesome, and thanks for sharing. And so we're going from Europe, we're going to jump back to Minnesota. So Jack, you're back in this game and we're excited to hear from you. Help us understand, what would you say is the value proposition of open standardized APIs?
I would say that not just for SD-WAN, an open API for SD-WAN. I certainly need the automation for the provisioning, and then after that, the next day, customer may want the service assurance aspects, and so you'll see oncoming APIs to support SD-WAN. But SD-WAN automation by itself is not enough, and we need the automation of the underlay connectivity services, whether that's carrier Ethernet or IP or IPVPN. The underlay connectivity services also need and can leverage the value of open standard APIs, which MEF is addressing. Because I get an order for an SD-WAN, it's also going to either assume, or it may be necessary, to Mark's earlier point, if I got 3,000 sites, I may have to activate a number of the connectivity services to support that SD-WAN. And so to get the what I call getting away from 30 to 90 days of a network service or product coming up to 30 to 90 seconds, I'm going to need the open standard APIs for SD-WAN, as well as the underlay connectivity services where applicable to support that SD-WAN. And I'll say one more thing is the work that is being done on MEF-70, MEF-82 are not just helpful in the development of open standard APIs, but those same models that can be used for vendors, for carriers, for customers to build open microservices within their own internal back office solutions and network operating systems, support systems, and orchestration solutions. Those common models are applicable for APIs as well as open microservices.
Awesome. Mark, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, to be honest, I share clearly the point of view of Jack, because when I was talking about this large deployment, at the end, one of the main failure was the fact that the underlay was not provisioned at the time we were going on site. And why is because there is simply no API to automate all of that. And then, of course, you are creating some challenge. And definitely this open API is there, and we are convinced of that within Equinox, to simplify the overall provisioning, but also to accelerate the deployment, because we know that it's quite obvious for the service provider. They are running after the time and behind the OTT players. And of course, they are always the bad guy when the underlay is not connected. So we know that by default, and this API needs to be there to be consistent from an end-to-end perspective. And I fully agree with Jack. And we know that today, we are talking about API for underlay. We are talking API for SD-WAN. Tomorrow, we have this SASE platform, which is coming. So we will need API as well to ensure the overall provisioning from an end-to-end. And that's clearly one of the main points that is well addressed now by the MEF through the different MEF standards, which is going. And that's, I think, a very powerful argument for the service provider to push this kind of approach towards the vendors like us in reality.
No, and it's great perspective. Then that was a good team. So I'll throw it back to you again, Jack and Mark. You share all that, but then what do you see as some of the industry barriers that are holding people back from adopting the standard APIs?
I would say some of the barriers have nothing to do with the technical issues, right? I think sometimes it comes down to organizational perspective or changes. If you look at what's going on in the network, there's a term that's been used, and that's software's eating the world. It's nothing truer than that in this space. And what you have is you have traditional IT departments and traditional network groups that are coming together and having to recognize that both groups are going to have to work together. Both groups are going to have to transform from a traditional, say, telco into a true software engineering corporation. And so in some cases, that whole idea is certainly is a learning curve for some, but in some cases it's going to take some organizational changes and jumping over that chasm, if you will, into newer technologies, thinking as a combination of a domain expert in cloud and network, along with understanding the software engineering aspects of that.
Yeah, and I think there is also some company strategy, to be honest. As a matter of fact, it's also a way to not going to open API to protect yourself from the competition. And there is this also this mindset sometimes that getting a standard API will slow down the innovation, but that's not the reality if we take it day one as a standalone point that you have to consider starting within your development.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm going to stay with you. And Jack, certainly feel free to jump in on this as well. I know for a fact in the audience, we have service provider software architects. We have enterprise architects. What advice do you give them?
So simplification, as said by Gabriel, is really the point, right? So we should stop trying to build very complex infrastructure. So that's what service provider is doing very well. But from an enterprise perspective, they should focus on their business need, right? And not only on the technical anymore. So that's something that we know that service providers are doing well. And sometimes it's becoming very challenging because we see some IT people thinking that they also master what the WAN infrastructure should be and could be, and then try to build some huge solution, which at the end doesn't deliver the services they are really expecting from their enterprise. And I think the good point is really to collaborate together with the service provider in order to understand how this transformation of their business is moving them forward and what is the good architecture to do so.
I'll just add this. I think both from an enterprise and a carrier perspective is a new recognition of who the customer is and what the customer expects. I believe that the customers expect that there's going to be network connectivity. Similarly, I believe the customers expect that there's going to be connectivity to the cloud. That cloud could be in a data center. That cloud could be out on the edge, as we discussed earlier. And the recognition that the sooner that we get to leveraging these open APIs, not just for SD-WAN or the underlay connectivity services, but also for the cloud, because the frontier in the customers are going to expect then to have vertical solutions and open APIs for financial, for government, for education, etc. And so the sooner we enable and automate what some could view as commodity, network and cloud, the sooner that the enterprise and carriers are going to be able to have automated solutions for vertical markets. And so now you have new revenue opportunity. At the same time, through this automation, you're reducing your operational cost.
Absolutely. Then Jack, continue and share what process is used for designing and developing standard APIs and what types are actually being developed.
I would say right now MEF has a great approach, and specifically before any of the APIs were developed, MEF started with the recognition of creating technical specifications on services, carrier Ethernet services, SD-WAN. Now we're doing layer 1 connectivity services, IPVPN. So we could take those technical specifications that clearly define the objects, the attributes, the constructs, and from there we can build the corresponding information models like MEF-82 that is derived from MEF-70. And from there, then we start saying, okay, now we have the resources. With these resources, then we can what I call restify them or build the Open API 3.0 or Swagger API that supports then the automation for specific functional areas such as order, quote, inventory. In places where we're doing that, certainly people are familiar with what we're doing from a service provider to operator with Sonata. Cantata came out with its first release here as well, which is service provider to enterprise. These are for carrier Ethernet. but we're leveraging, again, these specifications, these models to build these open APIs that will support the three actors of the enterprise customer, the service provider, and the operator, and that's our approach.
Now, we're absolutely building them, but Jack, then how are we possibly gauging success? What's the metric in?
The metric has to be implementation, right? At the end of the day, we can build all the APIs, but if they're not being consumed and leveraged, then we're not meeting the metric. So very simply, there has to be seen the value and the implementation. And again, the APIs, certainly Sonata and Cantata, are east to west APIs from an enterprise customer, service provider, operator. But if you look at the whole LSO, there's work being done, say, at Legato, and work that's been done at Presto. That same recognition that carriers have and customers with east to west open APIs and the value, we need to start seeing carriers and vendors recognizing the value in open standards and not having pairwise APIs between a carrier and multiple vendors within a carrier's own network. It's the same proposition. Removal of pairwise API, which reduces, if we're moving to open standards, open APIs, we remove the development time, and we get the value of those open APIs from all aspects of the industry.
Awesome. And Jack and team, we're wrapping up our time here for deep dive session number 2. Implementation is absolutely the key. Thank you so much, Jack. And thank you to all of our panelists as well. Folks, once again, put your appreciation and your hands together for Jack Pugacheski from Lumen Technologies, Gabriella Laghi from Sparkle, and Marc Boutier from Econops. Definitely my best test of the names in one session together. All right, don't go too far. We have our third deep dive session immediately following. That'll take us from SD-WAN to SASE, and I will see you there in just a moment. Now that's what I call a deep dive. I'm not gonna lie though, I almost lost my swim trunks on that one. You know what they say, dress from the waist up in this era we're in. Well, the waters got pretty deep, but going deep is the only way to know what we don't know. And that's the point. Jack and Gabriella, fantastic job and a great lead into our final deep dive of the day. SD-WAN to SASE, assure me, secure me. But first, they've all been teaching you something. I thought I'd better teach you something as well. Come on. Here we are back at the John Pet's Magic Bar to teach you how to mark a card. That's right. For recreational purposes only though, understand? It works like this, the classic pick a card, lose a card, magician, find a card, and I will walk you through a way of marking it. Now to start, we do need a spectator to pick a card, and it generally doesn't matter. We're going with the 9 of spades in this case. I want them to put it anywhere. So when I run through the cards like this, I'll ask them to say stop. Whenever they stop me, they put their 9 of spades or whatever their card is right where they stopped us. No tricks. Here's your key. When we put the cards back, I want you to take this finger, and it's called a crimp. We're going to crimp those cards, which is basically bend it, get a good bend. So when you look on top, it looks normal, but when you look from the side, we get this big gap, and you can actually cut right to the card you need. It's marking that card. That's your job. So when you go through them, one's going to look a little bit different. If you see it, wave at the screen, say something in chat, but you'll notice that one card, even on camera, that looks different. It should kind of jump out at you. Did you see it? Did you notice? But you're saying, wait a second, that's not fair because my card wasn't red, it was blue. But if we marked the one card, that of course would be the 9 of spades. Now that's when people say, hold on, do it again. So that we will. Let's do the quick version. Now normally you never do a trick twice because it's not surprising. And this is an educational lesson, so it's all right. So if I run through the cards and I have someone say stop, they stop, whatever. We stop at the 3 of hearts. And they indeed could have stopped at absolutely anything. They were all different. There are no other red cards in the pack. However, we're going to make that 3 turn red. That's right. So let's do it. Put it anywhere you want. Your job is twofold. One, you have to find that card, and you can do it through any mechanism you like, a couple triple cuts. You can do one of your fancy one-handed cut if you like, but in the end, you still have to turn it red. So watch for one red card. If I run through them, you should see it. Just yell it out. Where's the red? Before, maybe I passed it at the beginning. Either a card turns red or I do, and the whole MEF Infinite Edge series has to stop. Now, we seriously do need one. Do you see one red card? Well, we should see one red card, but that was the, yeah, that was that one. But that wasn't, wait, is that the only red card? Well, then indeed, that should be the 3 of hearts. That's right. So that's how you do it. You just look for the red card. Got it? Should be fine. Well, let's get back to the show. We are back, everyone, and it's going to be a great session ahead. Let's get our third deep dive session started for today. And I'm thankful to be joined by expert panelists today. Craig Connors, Chief Technology Officer of SD-WAN and SASE at VMware, and Mark Cohn, Principal Technology Strategist, Virtualization, Spirent. Thank you both so much for sharing your time and your talents with us today. Looking forward to having a good time. You okay?
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
Oh, good. Craig, let's jump straight into this and help me understand what are the trends that are shaping the security landscape today?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think there's a couple important trends that are shaping the security landscape and really leading us down this path towards the Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE. The first is that, classically, when we deployed security techniques, they were deployed in the perimeter, at the branch, in a firewall, signature-based security mechanisms deployed in ASICs. And we were able to categorize threats and then react to those threats when they were seen. And now in the modern world, we have a couple different challenges to that. One is that the perimeter is dissolving. People are moving all over the place. The second is that threats are evolving. And so we have advanced security techniques like remote browser isolation, like sandboxing, like network threat analytics, that really require cloud scale computing to deliver effectively. And so what SASE allows us to do is deliver some of those advanced threat techniques in the cloud, but in a way where they're close enough to users that they don't add a significant amount of latency. And as Mark and I were talking about, users are shifting from inside the office to outside the office. So that notion of the perimeter dissolving and work from anywhere is becoming more and more important, especially in light of the pandemic.
And I would echo what Craig was saying, because Spirent, like many other companies, are in a situation where we're not even sure when we would come back to the office. And even after the pandemic, when everything settles out, we've seen some survey data that indicates that up to 1/3 of employees that were in an office before COVID-19 are planning to stay at home and likely to be working from anywhere. So we need to have a architecture that is going to address this changing environment driven by the cloud.
It's a great add-on, Mark, and I appreciate you sharing all that. And Craig, as you mentioned, also it's that elevated exposure to people can continue to be working at home and where that's going to take us. So I love how we kind of build that as the basis. So we'll continue on that thought, Craig. If you could just define SASE and why it's eliciting so much attention today.
Right. I think it was already exciting before this work from anywhere shift. It's extra exciting now.
It is.
There's a couple different things that we always talk about in security. One is that when we give keynotes at VMware, we like to throw up this slide of all the security vendors in the industry, and there's like 1,000 logos on there, right? And that itself is a security risk, because if I'm in the SOC and I've got to manage a different firewall vendor and a different CWS vendor and a different zero trust vendor, and all of my different piece parts of security are coming from all these different places, it becomes a full-time job just to normalize what's going on in order to deliver that consistent security policy for everyone. So as apps modernize and they move from the data center to the cloud, as users move from the branch to anywhere. We want a way of simplifying our security stack, centralizing things as much as we can, and simply delivering that consistent policy to users so that we don't have such an enormous task in the SOC of trying to manage this for our security business.
How would you like to add on to that, Mark?
Well, SASE, in essence, provides a distributed architecture where we're moving functionality that was traditionally deployed within the customer environment, the CPE, and moving that to the edge. And the edge is one of the most exciting areas of the cloud. And as Craig was implying, this is going to be a new frontier where we're going to see a lot of different possibilities as SASE unfolds.
Sure. And how about, if you would, could you walk us through the SASE architecture?
Yeah, so let me walk you through, our architecture. And of course, I brought a slide to show what the VMware SASE architecture looks like. But I think at a high level, you'll see the same core components coming through no matter which vendor you talk to. On our diagram, on the left side, we have the access technologies, and on the right side, we have the security technologies. When it comes to access, there's the SD-WAN, obviously near and dear to my heart as the CTO of SD-WAN. That's where your branch offices, your retail stores, your distribution centers are accessing what we call SASE POPs, those cloud points of presence that are geographically distributed to allow users to access those security services in a low latency way. And then you have some form of zero trust or secure access so that users who aren't sitting in the branch can access from anywhere those same SASE POPs and going back to that consistency model we talked about earlier, get access to those same set of security services. On the right, when you talk about security, there's really two different core types that we look at VMware. First is cloud web security. So we're delivering this through a partnership with Menlo Security. This is securing my web and SaaS applications, things like CASB, anti-malware, URL filtering, remote browser isolation for securing those internet applications. And then you have next-gen firewalling, where you want to be able to secure the things that are happening in your data center, in your IaaS. So again, anti-malware, URL filtering, some of the same techniques, but you've also got IDS, IPS, and network threat analytics playing a big role. And I'm sure, Mark, being at Spirent and talking to lots of different vendors, you've seen a little bit different twist on this diagram, but I bet they all look kind of the same as ours does.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with Craig that the architecture is an architecture. It's not an implementation. So we're going to see a number of variants that are going to be based on the same model, which is to distribute the cloud security functions in the cloud. And because of the complexity of this environment, because of the number of vendors that we're talking about, one vendor per security function and other providers of various security and infrastructure components, this is a very complex environment. And because of especially the multi-vendor aspect to this, of SASE, this is one of the main motivations why the MEF stepped in, leveraging the momentum of the SD-WAN project to consider the industry's first attempt to standardize the SASE architecture. And not only do we need to standardize a service, but we also have to rethink and examine the role of testing in that service, because we're going to need to validate and assure the various different functions as well as the end-to-end service, and not to mention the existing infrastructure that the whole environment is built upon.
Yeah, and if I could just add to Mark's point a little bit there, he mentioned multi-vendor, and I think that's really key. When SASE was conceived of, I guess, the idea was it was going to be a single vendor, single pane of glass solution. And I think, the network security folks that are listening to this are probably thinking, well, that sounds ideal, but that's probably not realistic, right? And so you want to simplify things as much as you can. You want to provide a common cloud platform where you can interconnect these different security vendors. But I think for most of us, the reality is we're not all going to go to a single vendor tomorrow. And so as we chart that evolution, maybe from multi-vendor to single vendor, or as we live in perpetuity in this multi-vendor world, to Mark's point, how do I certify this? That's where MEF standards and techniques from Spirent become really, really important, because now it's not just trusting that the vendor's delivering what they said. I've got to take two solutions and make sure that they're interoperating in a standard, reliable, secure way.
No, it's so true. So you're saying that single pane of glass, that's a dream. We can hope, right? We can still have hope for that? Come on, Craig.
Hey, we're going to deliver it at VMware. So if everyone wants to go pure VMware single pane of glass, we've got the solution for you.
All right.
But we know that's not true for everyone, so we'll accommodate both approaches.
Well, then talk me through, what would you say are some of the best use cases that your customers are looking for?
Yeah, so, I'll give a couple different examples. And the first one is a financial services customer that we have, large across the United States. And one of the challenges that they faced is that they've shifted their work model as a result of the pandemic. And it's not a temporary thing. They've made a permanent shift where they're going to reduce their retail footprint. And instead of having folks sitting in the office 5 days a week, they're going to rotate them through the office. So folks will work from home some days and they'll work from the office some days. And that will allow them to reduce their spend on capital expenditure and things like that. And so as a result, they still want to be able to deliver that consistent security approach that we talked about earlier. One technique that a lot of big companies do when it comes to securing the devices and applications is using remote desktop technology, right? And so this company is using VMware's remote desktop technology. The PCs live in the office. The users, whether they're working from home or they're working in the office, they're accessing the same PC. It's just a matter of whether I'm actually sitting at the mouse and keyboard or I'm sitting at home and remote desktoping into that same device that's sitting in my office. And using their legacy approach, what they had to do in order to access those machines is to connect via their traditional VPN. So they have a big VPN headend in St. Louis. They connect back to St. Louis and back to the office. Well, that means for me, so I'm in San Jose, California. And if I need to access my PC that's sitting in San Jose, California, I'm actually VPNing to St. Louis, back to San Jose, and then I'm adding all of this latency, and it's really degrading my experience just to achieve that secure environment. With SASE, we've got these points of presence that are distributed around the United States. And so those users now, instead of going back to St. Louis, they're connecting no matter where they are to the closest SASE POP. In the example I gave, it happens to be in San Jose. So now I connect to a POP in San Jose. I'm authenticated using Zero Trust. I hop on the network and go directly to the San Jose office. And so I've cut my latency down from an order of magnitude in order to access that use case. And I think you'll find similar use cases like that in the remote work shift environment. The other big use case that we've seen at VMware is folks that are hosting their cloud security services on-prem are finding that, I talked about in the beginning, some of these advanced security techniques that require cloud scale computing. Well, when you start deploying them yourself, you realize it's not as easy as deploying firewalls used to be. Now I've got to manage this elastic set of racks of 50 compute servers to do remote browser isolation. And that's a big burden that I would like to offload onto a managed service. And so, one user benefit, this low latency access, the SOC benefit, the consistency, and now you have the network management benefit of simplifying the deployment in the lab. That makes it better for basically everyone in the network, which is kind of what we really want in any solution, right? And I'm sure, Mark, you've seen similar benefits like this in talking to Spirent customers about why they're making the move to SASE and what they're hoping to achieve.
Craig, we have, and the architecture is very exciting to many customers because of the nature of the workforce today. We talked about the trend toward a work from home or work from anywhere, just paradigm shift that's very dramatic, that it was already underway prior to the pandemic, but was certainly accelerated. And I don't think we're going to go back, as we discussed before, but that actually introduces some major challenges to managing this environment that we didn't have before. Think of the attack surface, which went from a physical perimeter to now we have in an almost a greater number of home networks that don't have enterprise class security protection. And we need to rethink how the home network environment fits into the broader enterprise environment when it comes to the number one priority for many CIOs. I just saw some data from a very large survey, which is security again, where over 40% of those CIOs are increasing their security spend as they look at 2021, especially on the tail end of major security breaches in the past 2 years. And one of the things that we have to think about is that when we're talking about a home user in particular, because these were the use cases that, or at least part of the use cases that Craig was mentioning, the home user is largely on their own. So the ability to minimize downtime and to be able to provide this notion of multi-layer troubleshooting is even more critical in this environment. We don't have an IT organization that you can wander down to the next office over. We can't just pick up another computer. These are home users that have a very limited environment, and SASE is going to revolutionize how we're going to be able to address this new class of user that's going to be here for over the long term.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people are probably thinking, well, didn't we already shift to remote work? Like, isn't this a solved problem? And I think really what happened is, and I'll say like VMware IT, these guys are heroes, because on Friday they said, hey, 30,000 people don't come to the office on Monday. And hey, IT staff, make sure you're ready for that. And so what we had was literally heroics from these network teams all over the world at all these big companies, making sure that people could just keep doing their jobs. And now, we've got time to take a breath and say, as Mark said, this is the new normal going forward. Okay, well, let's figure out how we would do this right. And how can we fix and robustify, I guess, if I can make that word up, some of the things we bandaged together to make this work really quickly overnight. And how can we make this secure and reliable for the long term so that we really can make this the new normal and make it a solution that the SOC and the NOC and everybody's comfortable supporting for the long term.
That's good. Thank you, Craig. Robustify. I'm actually going to write that down in case I have to get like a Pictionary or something. I have to define that or use that in a sentence. Trademark that. That's a good word. And you're right. I think there's a lot of heroes literally watching this in terms of what they've done, how heroic it truly is to making everyone accessible and usable from their home base. Mark, dig in for me a little bit. And how about the assessment of how SASE is going to unfold and even address what are some of the accelerators and maybe even what's going to limit the adoption?
Well, like many networking technologies, SASE is going to unfold based on a hybrid model. We've had the chance to talk to not only some of our traditional customers, which are technology providers as well as managed service providers and even security companies, but we've also talked to some enterprise end users as well, which we traditionally haven't served as much as the other segments. And what they have indicated is that they don't want to necessarily see a monolithic solution provided by a single vendor. What they're going to do is integrate elements that they already have in place that are already deployed in existing data centers or even on dedicated servers, and be able to bring on board cloud security functions as the edge gains momentum within these enterprise environments. And the hybrid environment just adds complexity in terms of management and in terms of validation of an assurance of how these end-to-end services are going to be delivered. I mean, if we had a streamlined single vendor solution, it would be relatively straightforward. We would work with that vendor, we would integrate with that network management system, and not only that, security management systems, whether it's a CM platform or whatever it might be. But in this environment, we have to be even extra vigilant to be able to think about how we're going to address disparate environments and multiple vendors' security functions, not to mention the infrastructure functions, which adds a degree of complexity. And that's going to necessitate that we think through a multi-layer testing strategy that builds upon the traditional network testing, but expands into a very different set of security testing procedures, facilities, and even tools. And security testing is much less structured. It is more ad hoc. It needs to be programmable to address an ever-changing set of threats in the environment. And SASE lends itself to restore some order by removing functions that may have been deployed at the end user and the data center, and now are going to be deployed in the cloud, and provides that opportunity to centralize these functions as we migrate to a more cloud native environment. It's not going to start there, but it's certainly going to end up there. And the MEF is going to play a role here as well. We had established the MEF Security Test and Certification Group, which is examining how we can test, how we can validate, and assure these new security services, especially not just SASE, but other MEF initiatives like the Application Security for SD-WAN program as well. So what we are going to see is an environment that individual users are going to dictate how their journey unfolds. And what we need to be able to do, whether you're a SASE provider like VMware or a network provider or a provider of test and assurance solutions like Spirent, we need to be able to adapt into that very, that pseudo customized environment to be able to address their, each individual needs.
Excellent. Anything you'd like to wrap up with, Craig?
Yeah, I would just like to add, in terms of adoption, it's pretty exciting that we talk about the sort of classic crossing the chasm model and innovators leading the way. And that's not what we see in SASE. I mean, I mentioned that large financial services customer that's using us for our SASE solution. Those are not usually the first movers. And so you can see how much excitement there is about this technology when companies that are usually very hesitant to adopt these techniques are adopting them to accommodate this new type of work environment. I think when it comes to challenges, just to build on Mark's point, we're bringing together a lot of different things: zero trust, SD-WAN, firewall, and cloud web security, deploying points of presence in the cloud. And if you look at the vendors that are getting in the SASE space, most of them aren't experts in all of those areas. And so the impetus is on us as vendors. At VMware, even though we have Workspace ONE Zero Trust, even though we have NSX, distributed firewall, and some of these security techniques, I think classically we're not thought of as a security company. And I think for some security companies, they're not classically thought of as cloud companies delivering cloud points of presence. And so the onus is on us to convince the users that we're the right solution to entrust their network to. And that's where folks like MEF and Spirent will help us in building that trust with the user base so that they feel comfortable making the move. Because like I said, the need is obviously there as seen by those early adopters.
Thank you so much, Craig. And you're right, you do bring customers together, just like this whole entire MEF Infinite Edge series has brought so many people together. And thank you so much for sharing your time and your talents, yourself as well, Mark. So everyone out there watching, put your hands together. Cheers, high fives, one more time for Craig Connors, Chief Technology Officer of SD-WAN and SASE for VMware, and Mark Cohn, Principal Technology Strategist, Virtualization for Spirent. Thank you so much for joining us. And folks, what a great day it has been, and a perfect way to wrap up episode 2 of the MEF Infinite Edge series. Here to wrap things up officially is your host, John. What a way to close out our deep dive sessions, huh? And thanks to Craig and Mark for an important look at how customers can take SD-WAN to the next level with SASE and the reassuring value of MEF 3.0 certification. And thank you to everyone who helped put together today's episode, the second in the MEF Infinite Edge series. We couldn't have done it without you and without the extraordinary support of our sponsors. Make sure you check out their sites on this platform after the show. Chat them up. Discuss some of the content, please. Plus, don't miss out on the opportunity to connect with your new peers right here on this site. You may find opportunity for collaboration, debate, and even some shared learning. And don't forget to check out MEF certifications and training offering from MEF accredited training providers. Wow. Well, from Will, Paul, and OSA's executive perspectives on solutions for the borderless enterprise, to market insights from Aaron and Rupa, and from MEF's president, chairman, and CTO, to our incredible deep dive sessions, we've hit the challenges and opportunities facing industry players from a lot of different angles. And how about those drawings from our sketch artist extraordinaire from down under, Matt McGain? Thanks again, Matt, for your take on today's content. There is so much cooking at MEF, and thank you, our audience, for joining us once again. We look forward to seeing you all next time on March 10th when we tackle SASE, getting an edge on SD-WAN. Uh-oh, trouble in paradise. Until then, stay safe, and we'll see you back here as we continue to explore the infinite possibilities of the digital world across the network core, the cloud, and you got it, the edge. See you then.